at Toyota. The picketing targeted Toyota cargo being hauled from the ports to Toyota plants in Mexico. The demand was to end wage theft. The striking short-haul port truckers in Los Angeles and Long Beach also want to be classified as employees, not independent contractors. Port truck driver Julio Garcia says being misclassified means business costs are shifted to workers, including some illegal wage theft.
We want to stop the illegal deductions that the companies are making in on checks every Friday. So I'm tired about that. All my friends are tired. I need benefits, and I raising the voice because I want the company to reclassify me. I want to be an employee. Everybody says that I'm an employee, so I want to be treated as it is.
A middle-class health benefits tax repeal act is being introduced in Congress by Representative Joe Courtney. It would eliminate a tax set to hit high-quality health care plans. Teamsters President Jim Hoffa says the bill stands up for working Americans. The tax is scheduled to take effect in 2018 and could be as much as 40% on benefits often negotiated by unions. Supporters of the tax say it will only apply to overly generous health plans, whatever that means. Seattle Council member Kshama Sawant was in court Thursday for disorderly conduct charges against her and other activists stemming from a November protest against Alaska Airlines. Sawant says the airline is refusing to comply with the CTAC vote mandating a $15 minimum wage and other worker rights. Sawant says instead of putting protesting activists on trial, it's Alaska Airlines that should be on trial for its poverty wages. She says 500 days after the minimum wage law took effect, workers at SeaTac Airport have yet to get the raise that they fought for and that the voters approved. AFL-CIO Secretary-Treasurer Liz Shuler says American workers are suffering these days from severe economic inequality as the presidential election season approaches. Shuler says the nation can't afford it anymore, and politicians running for office must be committed to raising wages and making the economy work for workers.
Most of America is working in an economy that is tilted toward corporations and the super rich, and that has to end. That has to end. America cannot afford it anymore.
This newscast made possible in part through support from the National Association of Letter Carriers and from ULICO, the Union Labor Life Insurance Company. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they're still right on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my time.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. The big Stamp Out Hunger event coming up next Saturday, May 9th. Make sure you get your paper bag full of non-perishable, non-glass items so our postal worker friends can pick it up and help to feed the country, feed the hungry. Also going to talk about college students on campuses across the country starting up their own food banks, because the issue of food insecurity on college campuses is reaching a high, I would argue, a needless epidemic level, if you will, level of food insecurity, or what we used to call hunger on the campuses. Also today, the anniversary, 45th anniversary of the massacre at Kent State. Going to talk a little bit about that. Also, it is Teacher Appreciation Week, so lots to get to, lots to talk about, lots on the agenda. Before we jump into that, though, also going to talk about the media coverage on what's going on in Baltimore. The Baltimore thing's been at the front of my head here for the last couple of days, and pretty much the conversations that I have when I meet people on the streets, or folks that I come across. This weekend, oh boy, where do I begin? In a room with 5 other people, and the topic of Baltimore was brought up by me, of course. And, all, working class, solidly blue collar, working class white males, in my age group, in that 35 to 55 range, right there somewhere. And the entire room, with the exception of me, came to the consensus that we should just go in and shoot them all and take them all out. And I'm going, really, is in this day and age, we have that thought? Because, if today it's them, then who's it again? Especially today in history, where the police came in and shot a bunch of workers because they were trying to organize into a union, had the audacity to want an 8-hour workday. When you have this kind of group joint, this mind of, this group think, it's dangerous. So I began throwing out, throwing questions into the mix just to kind of get a temperature of the people in the room. And oddly enough, there was this view that, if they just came here and applied for a job like I did, and they have all the same opportunities that they did. And you ask them, they all went to white suburban schools, came from reasonable backgrounds with a reasonable community. And it got me thinking of how people in my world now really don't understand the urban or even the some rural communities. Especially growing up in a housing project, I firsthand saw this. And it really got me thinking to a lot of those moments, growing up where, I don't think the average person gets how difficult being poor is. And especially when you're talking multi-generational. And I think back to, my learning of history and my understanding of A. Philip Randolph, who was, the head of the sleeping car, the sleeping car union, saying, look, we don't want handouts. We want jobs. And the problem in Baltimore, the problem in places like Ferguson, the problem in places like Cleveland and Detroit and other places where you have large minority groups, the lack of jobs and the lack of access to those jobs. It's amazing how and if you stop and you just step back for a second, you think of how our society has been manipulated. All of the jobs are in these neat little industrial parks. You ever notice that? They're all little businesses all together, little business zones that if you don't have a car, you can't get to. Because I don't know about you, but very few of them that I've seen actually have reliable public transportation. And that's one of the things we don't have in this country is reliable public transportation. And I would argue there's a reason behind that. And that's because we don't want the others traveling around. But it got me to thinking. And, it was one of those things that, I don't spend an awful lot of time thinking about where I grew up. But it reminded me, I was thinking about the desperation. And I was thinking in the moment of, when do you finally surrender to the reality that life isn't going to get better? I often joke that, when growing up until I was about 15, I didn't think I would live to 30 because very few of the people the men that I knew in my neighborhood did. They stabbed, shot, whatever, off to jail, who knows? But you didn't see many old people in my neighborhood. And, you get this sense of, what does it matter? You get this sense of, if I'm only going to end up in jail and if I only end up dead, what's it matter what I do? And when you lose that hope and that opportunity for the future, that's how you end up with communities that are broken. And I was remembering a moment from my childhood that, really I'd like to forget. But I was about 9 years old. And our house had been robbed. And we didn't have anything other than a little bit of food that was left over to get us to the end of the month. And there was no food left in the house, nothing. And I remember that, it was 9 years old. I'm going, I'm hungry. And my mother actually broke down into tears. And I remember that was the first time that I'd ever seen her cry. And it was that desperation. And I've thought about that over the years, in that I hope I never have to have that feeling, that I look into my kids' eyes and know that there's nothing that I can do. Now multiply that by, happening monthly or often and intergenerationally. The grandparents looked at the parents who looked at their kids, and all down the line. And I think you kind of get an idea of the hopelessness and the despair. Then you add on top of this the last 6 years, especially of austerity, the last 6 years of demonizing, and the last 40 years of demonizing people who need help. Instead of giving them jobs, we continue to hand out funny looking cards and then put massive restrictions on it. I look at Wisconsin right now. They're going through the process of restricting what people can buy with the SNAP benefits even further. No shrimp, lobster, or shellfish for you. Well, I don't know many people on $220 a month like they got in Wisconsin that can afford those things. There are about 420,000 people in households in Wisconsin last year that needed food help through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. About $220 a month was the average. I don't know many people who are going to be living the high life. And it got me thinking back to when I was a kid, because it was feast or famine at the beginning of the month. When you got the clownish looking money that you took to the store, you bought everything that you needed. Because, there's only one time a month you got to get someone to drive you to the grocery store, because, you take the cab, it's expensive. So at the beginning of the month, the shelves were stocked. End of the month, not so much. And I remember lots of days going to the cupboards and there's nothing there. And I often think back to that desperation. And one of the reasons that I consider myself a liberal or progressive or whatever or just rational, sane human being, that we shouldn't be demonizing people who need help. We should be helping people get food in the wealthiest country in the world. I think that's the least that we can do. But beyond those things, it's about the hope and the opportunity. You look at the education system in these urban and these poor rural areas, and there's a lot to be desired. You look at the opportunities, the blight around them, and all we get from the right wing is, well, we should give them tax credits. Well, we've done that. We've given and we've given and we've given to the wealth class in the hopes that they would go into those areas and quote unquote fix it. Well, what I think should happen is we should end all the handout programs. No more. This is going to upset somebody, but I don't care. You end that. You give people the dignity of work. You give people the dignity of getting up every day and making their own way, even if government has to be the employer of last resort. Even if here's a toothbrush, scrub that sidewalk for the next 8 hours. It is a job. It is something to be rewarded, and it's something to have some dignity and pride in. I think that's a huge part of this. But sadly, our Republican friends who believe government can and will do nothing are going to block that, because look, the poor communities are easy whipping boys. They're easy targets for fundraising attacks, and they're easy to beat up on. And until we change how we look at these communities and how we put jobs into those communities, I don't see things changing very much. And I think this idea and this pitting of communities against one another for scarce resources while we're enriching the wealth class isn't going to end until we realize the common enemy in all of this, the target in all of this, is not the poor minority communities, not the poor white communities, not the poor people, but really, really the wealth class that we created in this country. What I found interesting, a guy named Leland Stanford was the guy who pounded the final stake, the golden stake, into the Transcontinental Railroad. He was the governor of California, big railroad magnate, big money merchant magnate, big money guy. He was one of the robber barons of the era. He was worth about $1.5 billion at the time in today's money. And there were only a handful of those guys back then. Now we've got over 1,500. Look at how many of these people that we've created And how? Because of our tax code, because of lost opportunities for others. Just my thought. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Can't ever change your mind. So think before you die. Whoa, think before you die.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. This was one of the most significant days in U.S. labor history. A mass meeting of workers was called for that night in Chicago's Haymarket Square. The purpose of the meeting was to protest the police brutality that had killed and injured strikers at the McCormick Reaper plant the day before. Rally organizers were part of the movement demanding an 8-hour day. The rally was much smaller than organizers had expected. Rain began to fall as the last speaker was finishing when an army of 200 policemen appeared demanding the meeting disperse. Someone, unknown to this day, threw a dynamite bomb into the ranks of the advancing police. In the confusion of the moment, police began firing their weapons indiscriminately into the dark. When the smoke cleared, police had killed at least 4 in the crowd and wounded many more. A total of 7 policemen were killed. Most were killed by their own gunfire. In the aftermath of the event, unions were raided all across the country. The 8-hour movement was effectively derailed. 8 men were put on trial in Chicago. Some were not even present at the time the bomb was thrown. They were put on trial for their ideas. 4 of the men, Albert Parsons, August Spies, George Engel, and Adolf Fischer, were sentenced to death by hanging. A 5th man, Louis Ling, died under mysterious circumstances in prison. The remaining 3 went to prison and were eventually pardoned by Illinois Governor Altgeld in 1893. Before he was hung, August Spies declared, "The day will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you strangle today." His words proved true. The Haymarket Martyrs inspired and continue to inspire labor activists throughout the world. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. In a clip posted to YouTube that didn't appear on Fox News, Fox's Geraldo Rivera was confronted by a Baltimore resident frustrated by the network's history of biased and incendiary coverage of racial issues. Let's listen.
I want you and Fox News to get out of Baltimore City because you're not here reporting about the boarded up homes and the homeless people under MLK. You're not reporting about the poverty levels up and down North Avenue. You're here for the black riots that happened. Right? You're not here for the death of Freddie Gray. You're here for your story.
Fox did not air the resident's plea to Rivera in the on-air interview on Fox News' Hannity that followed. However, Rivera did take an opportunity to call the young man a vandal on TV. The next day on Fox and Friends, Rivera had this to say about the incident.
He was becoming so truly annoying and an obstructionist. It's exactly that kind of youthful anarchy that led to that destruction and pain in that community.
For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
They believe in teachers' unions. We believe in teachers.
What they do, they smile in your face. All the time they want to take your place, the backstabbers. right in your face. All the time they want to take your place.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. A guy who could be president right there, Chris Christie, or maybe not. Again, I love that frame that he uses. They believe in teachers' unions. We believe in teachers. And then they pursue legislation that harms teachers, who, I would argue the teachers' unions are the teachers. That's a collection of teachers. Good idea to maybe stop those right-wing attacks. And I look today, part of Teacher Appreciation Week, the Republicans here in Pennsylvania, in the House Education Committee, they pushed a vote on House Bill 805 that basically would allow school districts to fire senior teachers. We need to lay people off because of the massive budget cuts. We're just going to indiscriminately decide who we like or who's cheaper, is what I would argue. But here to talk a little bit about this and, the big Teacher Appreciation Week, I've asked Mike Crossy. He's the president of the Pennsylvania State Education Association. Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely, Rick. It's always a pleasure to be on the show.
So I look at this on Teacher Appreciation Week. It seems to me very telling and I guess really predictable to see these kind of attacks coming out from the anti-public education wing of the Republican Party.
You're right. It's absolutely a shame that the way these guys are portraying teachers it just makes no sense. It's absolutely an insulting. It was an insulting vote today. Just saying that teachers are worthless, educators don't make any difference, and I see the hard work that our educators do in schools every single day, despite the budget cuts of the last 4 years. And I just find this an extremely insulting vote today.
What would this House Bill 805? What would it have done? What's behind it?
Well, basically, what it says is that they're going to use test scores or other economic reasons to get rid of teachers. And you can't evaluate an educator with an invalid, unreliable test. It just makes no sense at all.
Why not? That's what we do to our kids.
Again, that's part of the over-testing we're trying to fight there too. What we need to do is, we need to use tests reasonably. You need to use tests to evaluate instruction, to inform instruction. I taught school for 34 years. And I would give a test to see whether students were getting the concepts or the facts that I was teaching. And if they didn't, I'd go back and review that. The system we have in Pennsylvania doesn't effectively evaluate teachers. It doesn't effectively inform instruction. We're over-testing our students. And now, because somebody's got some experience in the classroom, this legislation says, well, we should be able to get rid of them because of economic reasons. Get rid of seniority. It doesn't make any difference. If I look at other professions, my gosh, if I had a heart attack and I had to go in, I don't want a cardiac surgeon that has zero experience. I want somebody who's done this a few times. And, so I look at it and go, hey, experience counts. In my 34th year in the classroom, I may not have been jumping up and down anymore, but I was still good. I was still an effective educator, and I got through to kids. And, what they want to do now is they want to take that experience away from our children.
Yeah, and I would argue, and just looking at what the language is, it's basically just a way to I would say destabilize the teaching profession to where you would continually have a mass turnover every couple of years of the cheapest teachers and maybe an institutionalization of like Teach for America type programs.
Right. You're exactly right, because what will happen is, and I work with some of our student teachers, and I see some of our student PSEA members. And my gosh, I can't wait for them to get in the profession because they're going to be so good. But I got to tell you, it's all of us working together. It's experienced teachers working with new young teachers, bringing out some of those new ideas. Together, that mix, that partnering together with the younger teachers and the older teachers, that's what makes a difference for kids. That's what we have to keep in our schools. Because you're right, what's going to happen is every time the school budget gets a little tight, they're going to say, okay, who's on the top of the salary scale? Oh, let's get rid of them.
Yeah, and I don't know how that's good for education, and I don't know how it's good for schools to have that kind of that uncertainty. And I guess this would be another one of those moments where in better funded schools, In the wealthier suburbs, you would have a stable teaching force. And in poorer districts, like in Philadelphia or the York City School District, you would have constant turmoil and turnover.
Absolutely. There is no doubt that this would hurt the poor schools the most. Whether they're urban or rural, you're going to have a constant turnover of faculty, of staff. And, and you're right, you're going to destabilize the entire public education system.
So here it is. It's Teacher Appreciation Week, which I think is a great week. And I learned about it last night about midnight as my wife was up cooking muffins for the teachers here Monday morning, which, fantastic. Our teachers in my kids' school district, I think, do a fantastic job, even if the system, I believe, is kind of screwed up. Let's talk a little bit about this. How did this come about? I mean, I think of some of the teachers that I had as a student that I absolutely adored, and really, I think, changed the focus of things and my life, if you will.
You know what? I think this is part of a nationwide wave of attacking unions, of attacking anybody that is a public employee that finally starts to earn a little bit of a fair middle income living. They're constantly trying to beat up public employees. I really think this is part of a Tea Party extreme right wing agenda that's out to take down anybody that's starting to do halfway decent, and they don't want anybody in there that's going to cost any money at all. So I just look at it as a right wing, I hate to say conspiracy, but a right wing movement that wants to destabilize all of government.
Because it's not just here. It's not just here in Pennsylvania. These type of attacks are all across the country.
Yes, they are. These attacks are all over the country, and you see it one way or another. We saw lots of it during the Corbett administration. This bill here showed up during the Corbett administration, and it's a rerun of that bill, and it's just one more attack. I think a part of this too, right now, is to distract us from the school funding issue that we're trying to solve with Governor Wolf's budget.
So let's talk about the budget for a minute, because I understand, this is going to be a tough fight, and education's really at the front of it, because this governor's undoing what the last 4 years of attacks and defunding accomplished, and not in a good way either. And there are some voices out there who are opposed to it. They were happy with the direction that we were going under Governor Corbett. What do you see coming up in the next couple of weeks and months?
Wow, you know what I see? I see an awful lot of negotiating. I see an awful lot of fights. I see an awful lot of rhetoric. But I'm really, really hopeful that in the long run, what we're going to see is a new direction for Pennsylvania, a fresh start for Pennsylvania, something that turns Pennsylvania moving in the right direction. Governor Wolf's budget is absolutely on point. I don't care whether you're a Democrat, I don't care whether you're a Republican. Governor Wolf put a budget on the floor that shows he's a leader. Okay, he's willing to take on the tough arguments. He's willing to take on the tough fights. His budget completely reverses Tom Corbett's cuts in education, puts $400 million on the table for basic ed. For the first time in 6 years, we have special education funding to the tune of $100 million. For the first time ever, we've got $120 million going into early childhood education. That's a budget that'll make Pennsylvania grow, because that'll reinvest the money in our schools. That'll reduce property taxes when the state starts paying its fair share. I believe under Governor Corbett, we were 45th in the nation for funding our public schools from the state level. Tom Wolf reverses that completely.
And I think that's a good thing. Let's talk about the other hot button issue that's being thrown around that I'm sure is going to be part of the budget negotiation, and that's the pension issue. You've got the Chicken Littles out there screaming, the sky's falling. We've talked on this program that it's not a crisis; something needs to be addressed. But the end of the world isn't coming. What do you see? What rhetoric do you see coming out? And then what actually is happening? You think?
Well, what's happening is, again, Governor Wolf has put a fantastic plan on the table Not only is he redirecting several resources to make it easier for school districts to pay, the portion of the pension bill they pay, but he's also put $3 billion in general obligation bonds on the table that would pay down some of that unfunded liability. It's the first pension plan idea that anyone has said. It's not a pension crisis in Pennsylvania, it's a debt crisis in Pennsylvania. So let's pay that debt off. That makes so much sense. I mean, again, you can see he's a business leader. He's saying, okay, what's the real problem? The real problem is debt, not our pensions. Our pensions work really well in Pennsylvania. What we have here is a debt crisis. Tom Wolf has put a plan on to pay down that debt, and the taxpayers, you would normally think, oh gosh, bonds is going to cost the taxpayers more money. But Governor Wolf, what he did was he said, let's modernize the wine and spirit shops. Take that $184 million that we'll get in new revenue from the wine and spirit shops, and let's use that to pay off the bonds. I mean, it's an absolutely brilliant business move. Taxpayers won't be saddled with those costs of the bonds, but the taxpayers will save hundreds of millions of dollars by being able to pay down that pension debt. That's a result of the state not paying its fair share for over 15 years.
Yeah, well, what do you say to the other side of that says, well, instead of just modernizing it, we should sell off the whole thing and basically give it away and take that pot of gold and run?
It just, it's like, why would you kill the gold goose? I mean, it's just so short-sighted. It's unbelievable. I think let's do it right. Let's not look at the budget in silos. Let's look at the budget as a comprehensive budget. I mean, it's going to create jobs, good family-sustaining jobs, jobs that pay a fair wage. It's going to protect pensions for retired workers. It cuts property taxes for seniors. 270,000 senior citizens under this governor's budget. Property taxes will be gone. They won't have to pay property taxes anymore. It invests in our schools. It invests in our jobs. I'm very much pro this budget, this governor's budget.
Good. Well, we'll see how this continues on. Lastly, you got a message for all those teachers out there during this Teacher Appreciation Week?
Thank you. Not just to the teachers, but to everybody who works in our schools. Thank you so much. The difference you make with our children every single day, every single hour is a world of difference. Sometimes you don't see it in their eyes. Sometimes you do. But I thank you so much for what you do in our schools every single day.
There you go. And for our politicians, what the thank you and the that they should be giving is getting some more teachers into the classroom, maybe undo those horrible budget cuts and get some of those more than 20,000 education professionals that were fired during the Corbett years back into the schools helping our kids. Pretty simple stuff to me.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Mike. Mike Crossy, president of the Pennsylvania State Education Association. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Fighters, my friend, and the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
Climate change is real. It's caused by human activity.
Senator Bernie Sanders, climate hawk, enters the 2016 presidential race.
The drought isn't the only environmental issue Southern California is facing right now.
Thanks to fossil fuels, California still has the nation's dirtiest air. New study finds most extreme heat waves are caused by global warming.
What?
Plus, Pope Francis wants the world to protect God's creation, and the right-wing Heartland Institute wants him to knock it off.
All of those knockoffs and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Do members of the Republican Party believe in science?
No, Bernie. they do not.
Do they respect what the scientific community is telling us in climate change?
No, Bernie.
Are they going to learn from that?
They are not.
Or do they choose to be deniers?
Yes, Bernie, that last choice. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, from my count, we now have 6 major candidates declaring to run for president for the 2016 election.
Yep, Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, makes it number 6. He officially announced he is running for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2016 this week. But unlike the Republicans who have already announced their candidacies, Sanders is a climate hawk. Here he is recently on MSNBC.
Climate change is real. It's caused by human activity. It is already, as we all know, causing devastating problems. And if we don't transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, it's only going to get worse. That is not Bernie Sanders. That is what the scientific community is telling us.
So if I've got this right, on the Republican side, we've got Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and Jeb Bush, kinda, sorta, having declared their run for the nomination. 3 of those Republicans are out-and-out deniers. Jeb Bush is sounding like maybe he's not a denier.
But he's still a denier because he doesn't believe in doing anything about it.
Well, there's that. And then on the Democratic side, we have Hillary Clinton, not a denier, and Bernie Sanders, who's an independent, but I guess he's going to become a Democrat now to run. Bernie Sanders, definitely not a denier. He has been actually one of the best folks in Congress fighting to take climate action amidst this climate crisis.
Yes, and it'll be interesting to see if he is just entering the race in order to push Hillary Clinton more to the left, or if he actually is going to make it through to the nomination.
Well, he says he's going to, he's in this thing to win it, but if he ends up pushing Hillary to be more of a climate hawk, I think that can only be a good thing.
Yep. Meanwhile, the planet continues to ignore politics. A new study concludes global warming is increasing the odds of extremely hot days. It's the first study to estimate how climate change is already influencing some types of extreme weather. It finds that 75% of extremely hot days worldwide can be explained by human-caused global warming.
Isn't that almost the most obvious headline ever, that hot days caused by global warming?
Yes, you would think so, but this study is the first to actually prove it. More than 1 in 4 Americans live with dirty air. That's according to the American Lung Association, which released its annual State of the Air report this week. The top 7 cities for worst air quality are all in California.
Hey, we're number 1.
The dirty air is caused by what you see behind me, freeways. Not only that, major roadways, ports, and also trucking centers. These are all considered pollution hotspots.
Now, it's no coincidence that pollution hotspots on the list are all areas where major industrial facilities are located. The top 3 most polluted are in California's oil patch around Bakersfield and Fresno, and the neighborhoods near the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, which combined are one of the largest ports in the world. But the cleanest air is in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Sounds nice.
Some good news. The air quality is getting slightly better in Utah. The state's oldest, most polluting coal-fired power plant has finally been shut down for good.
Aw, sad trombone.
Of course, the owners waited to shut it down until one day before new rules limiting mercury pollution took effect because they didn't want to pay to clean up the plant's operations.
So it was the EPA, once again, forcing a coal-fired power plant out of business.
And to stop polluting the fish.
Tyranny.
Finally, Pope Francis hosted a climate change conference at the Vatican in Rome this week in advance of his major upcoming encyclical that will call on Catholics around the world to protect creation by protecting the environment and acting on climate change as a moral responsibility. But that was just too much for the climate science deniers at the right-wing, fossil fuel-funded Heartland Institute. Some of the big stars of the anti-science denialist club traveled to Rome to, quote, dissuade Pope Francis from lending his moral authority to the politicized and unscientific climate agenda of the United Nations.
Oh, I'm sure that worked out very well. How'd it go?
They were promptly escorted out of the proceedings.
So once again, the Catholic Church doesn't want to hear the truth. I got it. Thank you for clarifying. For much more on that story and the other ones we had no time for today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
You always
The second topic, which is you said you get a deduction for taking a plant overseas. Look, I've been in business for 25 years. I have no idea what you're talking about.
And I ran so far away. I just ran. I ran all night and day. I couldn't get away.
Oh, yes. Got to tell you, going to miss Mittens. I miss Mittens already. And I wonder if you'll still jump into the 2016 race. But you hear Mittens there. I have no idea what you're talking about, even though my company benefited from the tax breaks that moved companies overseas. Yeah, I forgot about that. Anyway, he was on TV with Fox and Friends attacking Hillary Clinton. Evidently, she had said something about mass incarceration being the real problem that we see in poor communities, how we're locking people up, and, hey, how we're number one in the world. In fact, in her speech, she argued that without the mass incarceration that we currently practice, millions fewer people would be in poverty. Because once you get a record, you're never going to be employable. Mittens, had a problem with that. He said, I was concerned that her comments smack of politicalization. Yeah, like what you're doing, it's not. Of the terrible tragedies that are going on there. When she said we're not going to have mass incarceration in the future, what was she referring to? The Romanator said, we don't have mass incarceration in America. Individuals are brought up before tribunals and they have counsel. They are given certain rights. And are we going to not lock up people who commit crimes? And I thought that was interesting because we lock up more people than anyone in the world. We have more people per capita by absolute numbers. You name it, we're number one in locking folks up. According to the Bureau of Federal Prisons, you got almost 210,000 federal inmates. You've got about 1.57 million inmates in federal, state, and county prisons. According to estimates, the number of people behind bars is somewhere around 2.4 million in 2013. They say 1 in 3 people in the U.S. has a criminal record. The highest incarceration rate in the entire world. And you kind of got to wonder, if we keep locking people up, what do we end up with? Profit, and lots of it. You think about the lobbying that's gone on, and I've thought about this, when I was a kid. When I was a kid, a lot of dumb things happened. You did dumb stuff. The cops said, hey, don't do it again. Come on. And you went on your way. Now they make everything a crime. Now they lock people up because, hey, we got for-profit prisons. We've got for-profit everything. And that's a huge problem. I mean, if you look up north, just north of where we're at here in Harrisburg, with the whole Cash for Kids thing, you got judges sitting on the bench benefiting from locking teenagers up in for-profit little kiddie prisons and making millions of dollars at it. Do you think that just happened outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania, or does it happen in every community across this country? When you attach a profit motive to law enforcement, be it the speeding tickets or parking tickets or whatever, you're going to see a massive increase. And when there's a profit motive attached to locking people up, guess what? More people will be locked up. And especially when you deal with contracts that say 95% of the cells have to be filled or the taxpayers are going to pay anyway. I got to be honest. I thought rehabilitation, I thought locking people up was part of the commons, things we did for ourselves. Not something we wanted to do, but sometimes you have to lock people up because, well, maybe they got 3 DUIs. And maybe they're just not fit to be in society. Sometimes you do that. Sometimes, not all the time. All of these minimum sentencing requirements, 3 strikes and you're out, all of this stuff creates, well, incarceration nation. Sad stuff. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You will look back again, you fight on to the end. Together we will live on forevermore. This land we have defended from all things dark and cruel. Now we are defenseless.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
It's well known that harsh climate conditions can mess with your mind, from cabin fever to heat delirium. But America is now experiencing an even more dangerous disease called climaticus non-vocalism extremism. CNE syndrome almost exclusively afflicts a narrow segment of our population, Republican political officials and candidates. It might stem from a genetic defect, but scientists say more study is needed on that. Symptoms include an obsessive impulse by GOP politicos to deny that human-caused climate change is happening, often accompanied by a feverish insistence that government employees be banned from discussing it. Hard to believe? For an example of climaticus non-vocalism extremism, look at Governor Scott Walker's Wisconsin administration. The Koch-funded governor and Republican presidential wannabe is an ardent climate change denier, but the state's Public Lands Board has escalated his denial to Orwellian censorship. The 2 GOP commissioners on the 3-member board, which oversees the ecological health of thousands of acres of Wisconsin forest lands, have banned agency employees from even considering damage caused by climate change. Worse, they have such a severe case of CNE syndrome that they've imposed a gag order on freedom of speech by public lands employees, prohibiting them from talking about climate change while on the job. The heartbreak of CNE is that its victims deny that they're in denial about the disease. Thus, the Wisconsin duo say that their no speech rule is not censorship because employees are still free to talk about climate change at home or even chit-chat about it by the water cooler, just as they might talk about sports. This is Jim Hightower saying, Governor Walker, who wants to be your president, says that he finds that censorship perfectly reasonable.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I've been standing here waiting, Mr. Postman, so patiently, for just a card or just a letter saying she'll be coming home to me.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. May 9th, the big event, Stamp Out Hunger. And I'm glad they didn't change the name to Stamp Out Food Insecurity or any of that stuff. It's really Stamp Out Hunger. We should be doing this immediately. And the good folks with the National Letter Carriers Association, they're out there fighting to make sure that our food banks are full. So on May 9th, you'll have a little paper bag, fill it up with canned goods, non-perishables, also non-glass items. Make sure the folks are there and able to pick them up, which is why we've asked Bill Lucini. He's the national business agent with the National Association of Letter Carriers. Bill, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So I look at this, and how many years you guys been doing this Stamp Out Hunger stuff?
We started in 1992, and since 1992 up and including last year, we've collected 1.3 billion pounds of food.
Wow. That is fantastic. I know locally we talked with Daryl Vance, the guy here locally in Harrisburg, and he said last year they had 62 truckloads full of food just that came out of this little area. That's an enormous amount.
Yep. In Pennsylvania last year, 41 branches of our union, the National Association of Letter Carriers, collected 3,920,000 pounds of food, almost 4 million pounds of food just in Pennsylvania.
And where does all of that go?
So the food that is collected by all these branches in every town, in every community, it stays locally. So wherever the food is picked up, be it Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, every small town, every place where there's city delivery letter carriers are delivering the mail, and the national and the rural letter carriers, the National Rural Letter Carriers Association will also pick up the food. It goes to the community food banks, and the food banks right in the neighborhoods where it's picked up. So that's the beauty of it. I obviously help out every year. I try to, my responsibility is the whole Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and half the state of New Jersey. So I pick a location every year to go help unload the trucks as the carriers come back from their rounds. And when they open those trucks and you see those trucks filled with food, it's just an amazing feeling. And it gets boxed up, it gets put in these big, what we call gable boxes, it gets put on the back of truck. I've been at post offices where pickup trucks from the local food banks, the local church pantries come with pickup trucks, and we load the pickup truck, they pull away, the next pickup truck pulls up from a different food bank, from a different church pantry, and we just fill up all the food pantries and the food banks across this whole great country with this one-day food drive.
This is an amazing event, and one that I highly suggest folks take part in. May 9th, I guess there's going to be a bag in our mailbox coming up that we're going to fill up and leave out. Is that how it works?
So, some places get bags. Not all the areas in Pennsylvania will get the bags, but everyone will get a reminder. We'll get a postcard delivered starting tomorrow through Friday that will remind them to please put out food on Saturday morning and just leave it by their mailbox. It's the easiest food drive to do. All you have to do is put the food out where your mail is delivered. If your mail is delivered at the curbline box, put the food by the curbline box. If the letter carrier brings the mail right to your door, that's where you put the food. We pick it up. It gets to the food banks. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I always feel sorry. And in a way, I feel sorry for my letter carrier because she drives one of these little trucks that's on the wrong side of the road. And that thing is, every time I've seen her at this time, it's packed and there's nowhere for her to move. But I know it's for a good cause.
Yep. And the reason we do this the second Saturday in May is because the food banks are depleted by this time. Over the course of the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, that's when all the big food drives happen. Right. And that's when the food banks and the pantries get filled up. By this time, they're depleted. So this food that we collect takes them through the lean months of the summer. And another good reason we do it in second Saturday of May is because when the schools get out, those children that need food that are usually dependent on the lunch programs and the breakfast programs that they get at school, they're not in school. Yep. So they need to go to the food pantries, then the food banks, and we need to make sure the food's there.
And, in that vein, and I always bring this up whenever I talk about school lunch programs, the reason the school lunch program over the summer was canceled, you go back to Ronald Reagan, who Mr. Ketchup is a vegetable. He was the one who canceled those programs, because I remember him when I was a kid growing up in the housing project on the west side of Cleveland. You'd go to the local public school, and they had school lunch programs there. So, that's something I hadn't put much thought into, that first couple of weeks out of school, a big time for food bags.
Yep, it certainly is. And we enjoy doing it. You can't put enough food out there. And if you see your letter carrier struggling, if he's walking around and he's got a couple extra bags, help him. Pick up the food to help him take it to his truck. That would be much appreciated too. But we'll get the food and we get it to the food banks, and we just enjoy doing this every year.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I know at my house we usually get a bag, which is one of those things that my wife usually then goes crazy on, because that's what she does. So if folks didn't want to leave a whole bunch of stuff out for the letter carrier, could they take it to the post office?
Absolutely. Yes, they could. They could take it to the post office, and they could walk it right in the front window. The clerks will be glad to take it, and they'll put it with all the rest of the collections that the carriers will be bringing back when they return from their routes.
This is a great event, and I hope people on May 9th, Saturday, will take part in this and put some out, because at the end of the day, we never know, do we? I mean, the collapse of 2008, I think, showed a lot of folks that we all could be vulnerable to what they call food insecurity, or what we used to call as a kid hunger, and that putting a little bit of food into a food bag, maybe someday you might need it.
Right, and don't forget to remind your friends and your relatives and your neighbors. Every year I remind my neighbors. I get up early on Saturday morning, I take a little walk, and I see my food's out there. So then I remind my neighbors, oh, today's the food drive. Oh yeah, thanks. Just word of mouth, pass the word. Just remind people, put some food out at your mailbox on Saturday, and everyone will benefit from it.
So what are we hoping for this year?
Oh, well, like I said, we did almost 4 million pounds just in Pennsylvania alone in 2014. So I think we can beat that. I really think we can beat that. And we hope to. And if it's a nice day, sometimes if it's a little rainy, people don't want to put the food out because, they're worried about the bag getting wet. Don't worry about it. Put it out there in a plastic bag. Put it out there. We'll make sure it gets collected.
So is there like a competition between the NALC states? Are there different regions? Do you guys compete with each other? Hey, we in Pennsylvania did 4 million. You should be doing more. None of that?
No, there's none of that. We have some wonderful large branches that really go out of their way. I mean, we're just happy for all the offices across the whole country. This is being done across this whole country on this one day. I wish I could show everybody the film of last year's food drive and the food drive from the year before that, watching the carriers come back, watching the Girl Scouts and the other labor unions help unload the trucks, and the people that volunteer at the food banks stocking the shelves and putting the vegetables with the vegetables and the soup with the soup and the juice with the juice. It's just wonderful to see.
Well, you send me a link. We'll make sure we get it up on the ricksmithshow.com so people can take a look at it. But what I was trying to do here, Bill, and you kind of cut me off there. I was trying to get a little pride here in the state going, hey, Pennsylvania did 4 million pounds. We could maybe do 4.5, 5.
Well, we could do 6. We could, let's double it.
Maybe take on New York, maybe take on California, maybe be the state, right?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. But the more we get, the benefits to people who need it the most.
Yeah, that's fantastic stuff. And I appreciate the work that you guys do and the work that the letter carriers are doing. Because, I know there's an awful lot of attacks going on this attacks of the Postal Service. And this is just one of those things that I think is such a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And we're the eyes and ears in every neighborhood, in every street, 6 and now 7 days a week. We're delivering packages for Amazon in many, many communities on Sunday. So now we're out there 7 days a week. And when we see people in trouble, the letter carriers it's just lucky. We're just there and we step up and we help people that are hurt, or we've been there when people's houses are on fire. It's because we're there. We're on those streets every day, and we're just normal American citizens. And as we see somebody in trouble, we help them. And this is a way to help a whole lot of people.
This is a great thing, being part of the community. Bill, I appreciate you taking time for us. Great job. I wish you the best here in Pennsylvania. I'm hoping for 4.5, maybe 5. Let's see if we can beat even that. Bill Lucchini, I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. I really appreciate you giving me the time.
Anytime. And remember, Saturday, May 9th, all day. You put the bags out, make sure that they're filled, and you're helping not just your neighbors, but at some point you could help yourself. And Bill made a really interesting point there that with May, school coming to an end, the need is now, because we all think about giving during the holiday season. We all think about at Christmas time and the Thanksgiving and that. In fact, when we used to run our Hungry and Homeless for the Holidays events, which we are going to be doing again this fall, you're thinking about the holidays. Now you got somebody out there who's thinking about, hey, how do we make sure people get fed? How do we make sure that our food pantries are full and that nobody's stomach goes empty in the wealthiest country in the world? And I highly suggest that you take part in this. Remember, Saturday, May 9th, put it on the calendar, mark it on your hand, put a little ring around your finger, whatever it is you've got to do to remember, but fill the bag up on Saturday, May 9th for the postal workers to come out and pick them up, take it away. Anyway, if you've missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go get the podcast, also the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me here, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break in the next hour, talk a little bit about what's going on in Baltimore, a little bit about what's going on college campuses with hunger and other issues as well. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Red roses too. I see them blue for me and you. And I say to myself,
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Striking port truckers were joined Thursday by San Diego area allies in ambulatory picketing at Toyota. The picketing targeted Toyota cargo being hauled from the ports to Toyota plants in Mexico. The demand was to end wage theft. The striking short-haul port truckers in Los Angeles and Long Beach also want to be classified as employees, not independent contractors. Port truck driver Julio Garcia says being misclassified means business costs are shifted to workers, including some illegal wage theft.
We want to stop the illegal deductions that the companies are making in on checks every Friday. So I'm tired about that. All my friends are tired. I need benefits, and I raising the voice because I want the company to reclassify me. I want to be an employee. Everybody says that I'm an employee, so I want to be treated as it is.
A middle-class health benefits tax repeal act is being introduced in Congress by Representative Joe Courtney. It would eliminate a tax set to hit high-quality health care plans. Teamsters President Jim Hoffa says the bill stands up for working Americans. The tax is scheduled to take effect in 2018 and could be as much as 40% on benefits often negotiated by unions. Supporters of the tax say it will only apply to overly generous health plans, whatever that means. Seattle Council member Kshama Sawant was in court Thursday for disorderly conduct charges against her and other activists stemming from a November protest against Alaska Airlines. Sawant says the airline is refusing to comply with the CTAC vote mandating a $15 minimum wage and other worker rights. Sawant says instead of putting protesting activists on trial, it's Alaska Airlines that should be on trial for its poverty wages. She says 500 days after the minimum wage law took effect, workers at SeaTac Airport have yet to get the raise that they fought for and that the voters approved. AFL-CIO Secretary-Treasurer Liz Shuler says American workers are suffering these days from severe economic inequality as the presidential election season approaches. Shuler says the nation can't afford it anymore, and politicians running for office must be committed to raising wages and making the economy work for workers.
Most of America is working in an economy that is tilted toward corporations and the super rich, and that has to end. That has to end. America cannot afford it anymore.
This newscast made possible in part through support from the National Association of Letter Carriers and from ULICO, the Union Labor Life Insurance Company. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Sounds like it's times like these it's times like these.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Well, it looks like the clown car's filling up. Going to need some child safety seats in the back there of the GOP presidential clown car as Carly Fiorina, she threw her name into the ring, saying that she understands how the economy actually works. Someone who came from Hewlett-Packard that took a nosedive, but I'm told we can't go after that for that. And also Ben Carson, literally a brain surgeon. So now all I think you need is you need a rocket scientist too, and one that's maybe as insane as Carson seems to be. But Fiorina, not a really good, or Fiorina. I'm going to struggle with that one. It doesn't matter. It's not going to be there long. But someone actually got the CarlyFiorina.org website and put up about 30,000 unhappy faces of the people that she laid off while she was the head of the Hewlett-Packard. Anyway, here to talk about what's going on in the media, how they're presenting the Republican hopefuls, and also a little bit of talk about how the media is looking at Baltimore. I have asked Zach Petkenis to come and talk with us. He's the vice president of communications over at Media Matters. Zach, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I look at the two child seats that they're going to have to install into the clown car. What are we seeing around the messaging today about Ben Carson and Carly whatever?
Fiorina.
I'm horrible with names. With a name like Smith, I'm really just horrible with last names.
Just remember her as the Demon Chief lady from years ago in the primary.
There you go. All right.
I mean, what we're seeing in the media, from the right-wing media, is exactly what you would expect to see from these guys. Ben Carson has been a darling of Fox News since the very beginning. It's not just Fiorina and Carson Huckabee over the weekend, so that he's jumping in. So we have a bunch of guys and one woman who are darlings of the Fox News right-wing media set. I mean, these guys are playing to Fox News, and Fox News is working overtime to carry them over the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the reality is the vast majority of these, in my view, Carly and Ben Carson and Huckabee, and just go down the list, are there one to get the corporate cash set up there and the Coke money to set up their PAC with and their super fund with, so that they can have economic power. But it's also about, as you pointed out, the TV appearances, and then throw on top of that the book deals and the speeches. This is really a cash cow, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, look, these are basically in-kind contributions from Fox News and the right-wing media, on here. But it's going to be very interesting from a political perspective. But given that you have, I mean, you call it the clown car. I mean, we're talking about a lot of people who are running for this nomination. Eventually, Fox is going to have to center around somebody. Otherwise, we're going to have a situation what happened last time in 2012, where the primary just goes on and on and on and on and on.
Which I'm okay with, Zach. I'm now that we've got, because I've been going, who's going to be the Snow White? Last time you had Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs running around doing all of those really hilarious debates, which just made my job immensely easier. We now have Snow White, but the dwarfs have gotten more numerous.
Yes, no, I mean 100%. I mean that's what this is what we're seeing. This is what we're seeing, and it is a direct result because the anointed front runners in this, the Jeb Bushes and the Scott Walkers and potentially the Marco Rubios. You have to remember they have serious problems with their base. They have serious problems with the far right wing media, the Laura Ingrams of the world, and the Rush Limbaughs and the Mark Levins. They have serious problems. Jeb Bush and his history with immigration reform. Jeb Bush on his history, supporting Common Core. You have Scott Walker, who is not as pure as they would like him on Common Core and immigration reform. The disillusionment, the angst amongst right-wing media with the so-called front-runners by the Republican establishment is what is fueling and leaving an opening for a lot of these guys like Huckabee and Fiorina and Ben Carson to get in. So they're the purity that these guys are requiring may be shooting them in the foot down the line, because it's allowing an opening for, what is there now, 10, 15 guys in the race?
No, last I saw there were like 210.
Yeah.
Evidently the people because I guess the bar to sign up to run for president is fairly low. And you could just go fill the paperwork out and, Joe can run for president. I had actually thought of throwing my name in for the Republican nomination for president as well, because I guess it is that low.
I'll quit my job right now. I'll go be your campaign manager.
But there's the reality, though. Much like Farina and Carson and some of the others, if I could set up a super PAC and get a whole bunch of Coke money and a whole bunch of billionaire cash to fund me for the next couple of years, why not?
Well, you need to find your billionaire.
Yeah, see, that's a problem. And I got to be honest with you, Zach, that's a problem with our political system, to where you have to find a billionaire before your ideas and values and all that stuff can be considered. You got to find the cash, which means you got to sell your soul.
Well, and we're seeing the consequences of that now. People are talking about this anti-Clinton book that's coming out, or that people have been talking about. It's coming out tomorrow by Peter Schweizer. Peter Schweizer is associated with this group called the Government Accountability Institute. Government Accountability Institute is funded by this family called the Mercer family. The Mercer families are these billionaires who are really bankrolling Ted Cruz's campaign. So these families, these billionaires, they have tentacles in all sorts of different things on the right wing.
Yep.
And what's coming out of it are books like this Clinton anti-Clinton book, which has error after error after error, which we've been pointing out.
Well, what I've been saying for the longest time is we're turning politics into polo, where only the wealthy get to play, and it's just their little hobby sport that they, in their country clubs, they get to talk about. It gives them something to do. Us commoners, we talk about football and baseball. Theirs is politics. Same thing. And the sad reality is those of us at the bottom, we're the ones who lose in this game, because I always used to say that they may have all the money, but we outprocreated them. That doesn't seem to matter so much anymore.
Well, I mean, look, there apparently are a lot of enough billionaires to go around to fund, what is it, 214 Republicans. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's move over to Baltimore. I mean, a lot of the media coverage that I saw right from the beginning was the same kind of thing you would expect, the same kind of community bashing that one would expect. Have we changed? Have we seen a shift in the conversation and what the mainstream media is putting out? Have we seen a shift maybe in what Fox News is putting out? What are you seeing on the Baltimore front?
Yeah, I mean, there has not been a significant shift on the Baltimore front. I would, the tragedy that happened, or the thing that happened down in Texas recently has been dominating the coverage and taking Baltimore a little bit off the headline compared to.
Oh, that's okay. They shot somebody in the back today. It should pick up.
well, there's the media is trying to figure out exactly what happened down there. I'm not sure that's exactly what happened. It's still being figured out. But
no, I mean in Baltimore. Evidently in Baltimore, police shot somebody in the back today.
No, but the police was just on and said that they actually didn't shoot anybody. A weapon was discharged from someone that they were trying to arrest.
Oh, okay.
Is the latest.
Okay,
so
someone got shot in the back.
In the interest of, well, I think a gun went off. I'm not sure anyone got shot, but again, it's still being figured out. It's real time info again.
Right. So. No, I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in looking at this, to me, the conversation was all blaming the Black community and blaming poor communities. Do you think we'll see a shift from that to maybe how do we solve some of the solutions and solve some of the problems in poverty-ridden areas?
I don't see us moving toward that. Certainly not within the Fox News crowd, and we're seeing a little bit within the mainstream media, a little bit more with MSNBC, obviously, and but the main focus has is not on the root causes of what's happening, but the specific instance, and the coverage has been pretty bad. I mean, you just saw over the weekend after the charges were read out by the state attorney, after people had been calling for justice, the instinct from the right-wing media, from Fox News, was not to say, let's wait till the facts come out. Let's give this state attorney some room to ride and wait for the facts to come out. They immediately went to attack mode of the state attorney.
Yeah, because she's married to a city councilman, and actually
married to a city councilwoman. I mean, a councilman. They were pulling out every possible example, from the second she finished that press conference to try to undermine her. And you just get a sense of, that's just the way that this works. If you knee-jerk reactions from the folks at Fox News and the right-wing media, that is not based on facts. It's not based on even a well-constructed argument. It's just you need they stake out their side. And that's the way it goes, and it really does a disservice to the dialogue around something that's really important that we get it right this time.
Over the weekend I had a conversation with 5 people who were about my age, around very blue collar working class folks, who all seem to have in unison the same idea of we should just go in there and shoot all those rioters because you can't have that kind of stuff. And I got to wonder where that comes from. Is that a societal reaction? Is it something that they heard on one of the networks? Because I've seen like the attorney, one of the prosecutors in Wayne County, Michigan. That's what she wrote. Is this something that the media is generating, do you think, or is this part of just a knee-jerk reaction by certain folks?
I mean, I think that it's certainly fueled in large part by right-wing media, which really goes to the influence that they have and the important role that the media plays in our society and in this nation. They basically give permission in a lot of ways for people to voice some of these, frankly, hardline, irresponsible, reckless things. And it's one of the reasons why what they do is so important, and why it is so important that they report things both accurately but as well as responsibly.
Yeah, I look at this and, you go back and you think from 1987 forward, pretty much how the media has been completely taken over by corporate voices and right-wing cranks. And you kind of wonder, we have no balance on the airwaves, really, and really nothing to compete with the Limbaughs and the Hannitys and the Ingrams and all of that. And you got to wonder if at some point society just doesn't break down from that.
Well, I mean, I think what you're seeing, I think you're seeing the beginnings or in the middle of members of the public saying we need to stop. From recent polling about how, the media are some of the least trusted institutions in the country. I think they fare worse than Congress. So that goes to show you something.
But here's the thing, Zach. If you believe nothing that comes in, what does that do for society? I mean, degrading it and breaking it down to where nobody trusts anything that they hear, see, or read. What does that do for us?
Oh, I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying. I think that there is overall a desire by the American people to get good, accurate news, and they just don't feel that they are getting that and that they're being well served. So I don't think that the problem is identifying the problem. I think the problem is identified. I think that people are just, they're not sure what to do about it, which is why what we do every single day is, we try to call balls and strikes here to make sure that people are getting accurate information and to call out individuals and reporters and outlets that are not providing fair and accurate information.
And you guys do a fantastic job over there at Media Matters. If you want to take a look at some of the work that they do, I suggest MediaMatters.org, the website. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Zach's name. It'll take you right there. Zach, I appreciate you taking a little time for us out of your day of being the watchdog and the eye on the media. I look forward to having you back again real soon.
Anytime, Rick.
Thanks so much. Zach Petkanis, he's the Vice President of Communications over there at Media Matters. If you want to check out their site, just go to thericksmithshow.com, click on Zach's name. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Now who'd have thought that after all, something as simple as rock and roll would save us all? Now who'd have thought that after all, it was rock and roll?
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. This was one of the most significant days in U.S. labor history. A mass meeting of workers was called for that night in Chicago's Haymarket Square. The purpose of the meeting was to protest the police brutality that had killed and injured strikers at the McCormick Reaper plant the day before. Rally organizers were part of the movement demanding an 8-hour day. The rally was much smaller than organizers had expected. Rain began to fall as the last speaker was finishing when an army of 200 policemen appeared demanding the meeting disperse. Someone, unknown to this day, threw a dynamite bomb into the ranks of the advancing police. In the confusion of the moment, police began firing their weapons indiscriminately into the dark. When the smoke cleared, police had killed at least 4 in the crowd and wounded many more. A total of 7 policemen were killed. Most were killed by their own gunfire. In the aftermath of the event, unions were raided all across the country. The 8-hour movement was effectively derailed. 8 men were put on trial in Chicago. Some were not even present at the time the bomb was thrown. They were put on trial for their ideas. 4 of the men, Albert Parsons, August Spies, George Engel, and Adolph Fisher, were sentenced to death by hanging. A 5th man, Louis Ling, died under mysterious circumstances in prison. The remaining 3 went to prison and were eventually pardoned by Illinois Governor Altgeld in 1893. Before he was hung, August Spies declared, "The day will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you strangle today." His words proved true. The Haymarket Martyrs inspired and continue to inspire labor activists throughout the world. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Tales of American political history with Clinton Porter Hackney.
Within the vast competition of the American free enterprise system lies the very competitive business of lawmaking. Just as corporations and businesses are free to compete for their share of the marketplace, so too can government entities compete against one another to draw more profits for their territory. By the early 1900s, the state of Nevada had a declining mining industry and was steadily losing population and economic growth. The only good fortune, it seemed, was the nation's advancement of relatively cheap transportation, such as more comfortable railroads and the automobile, which allowed the western states to lure some of the American population their way. One of the most successful early legislative ploys came from creative minds in Nevada. They needed a little luck to make it happen, but it did happen. Join us again next time to see what innovative idea Nevada hatched to improve their condition. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Officially in love with Michelle Bachmann, even if she's batshit crazy. Rick Smith.
It's all brand new. I'm crazy for you. You know it's true. Yeah, I'm crazy for you.
I gotta tell you, I miss Michelle Bachmann. I miss the whole lot of crazy there. But there was a lot of crazy this weekend. Basically under the banner of dumb, dumber, dumbest, holy dumb, and never mind dumb. Or simply just Obama Hate Fest 2015. Just a thought, Republicans, Obama's not running in 2016. He's not the beating him up, not helping you. Anyway, they had the Fabulous Five were in town there in South Carolina. Jeb Bush, Rick Santorum, Rick Perry, Lindsey Graham, and Ted Crazy Cruz. They got together for the 2015 South Carolina Republican Party State Convention on Saturday, collectively being the sounding crazy board to feed the insaniacs in the Republican base. Basically feeding the trolls. Rick Perry, evidently, according to CNN, got the biggest applause line of the day when he said the best defense against crime is armed citizens. Okay, let's arm everybody in Baltimore. Just a thought. How would you like that there, Rick? Rick Perry said the great issue of our time is a battle between Western values of freedom and this totalitarian worldview of Islamic fanatics. Basically, that was the hit parade for him. Ted Cruz was there. He said 2016 is going to be about an election, about whoever's got the loftiest rhetoric. It's folks are going to look past what people say. They're going to look at what you've done. This from the guy who's introduced one piece of legislation and has been running all over the country, running for president, accomplishing nothing. Lindsey Graham was there. He said that I see a Republican Party giving people in Baltimore and nearly every other big city hope like they haven't seen in past 8 years. You mean the last 2 of the Bush administration too? I would argue the entire 8 of the Bush administration and really a good number of the Clinton years and all of the Bush, H.W. Bush years and all of the Reagan years for that matter. So there you go. Lindsey Graham went on the attack against Islam, saying that no doubt tired of hiding under the bed on ISIL. He says, I've never seen so many threats to our homeland as I see today. I'm not quite sure what that means, but okay. Rick Santorum was there. The guy who once said mainline Protestants are actually serving Satan. Remember that guy? Yeah. He said there are more terrorist organizations with more safe havens, more capacity, more capability, more weapons, more men than hit us on any time before 9/11. Okay. Ted Cruz jumped in, not to be outdone. He said, we need a president who's not an apologist for radical Islam terrorists, suggesting that it's just like the Crusades and Inquisition. He said, we need a president who says ISIS is the face of evil and we will stop them. Bloomberg pointed out that Santorum was on the Islam front as well. He said you can't defeat ISIS unless you define the enemy for who it is. This is an enemy that wants to bring back a version of Islam that was popular in the 7th century, a radical idea about beheading and crucifixions. He went on to say, and the big punchline here was, this is not modern Islam. It is 7th century Islam. So I have a suggestion. Let's bomb them back to the 7th century. Yeah, and I would argue that Rick Santorum wants to take us as a nation back to the 7th century. Basically, women in their place and all that. But I got to be honest, a weird thing, really bizarre kind of weirdo thing with Santorum that maybe gives me hope that evolution is possible, and that, even in the really bizarre area of Santorum world, something's possible. Evidently, over the weekend at the big South Carolina convention, he was asked about Bruce Jenner, who evidently came out as a transgender woman. Okay, whatever. Santorum said, and you can't make this up, he said, if he says he's a woman, then he's a woman. And if everyone didn't fall off their chair and hurt themselves, what he actually came out with next was fairly rational, which I got to wonder what's going on in the mind of Santorum. He said, my responsibility as a human being is to love and accept everybody, not to criticize people for who they are. Wow. That to me seems fairly rational. He says, I can criticize, and I do, for what people do, for their behavior. And this is where crazy comes a little bit. But as far as who they are, you have to respect everybody. And these are obviously complex issues for business and society. And we have to look at it in ways compassionate and respectful to everybody. I got to be honest, this is a new level of maybe growth, maybe maturity, maybe just not being a complete and total a-hole. I don't know, but it's something, right?
Yeah, maybe there's some light going into that closet with him.
Oh, come on. Maybe who knows? Maybe this is the first step to opening up that closet door. Who knows? But as I pointed out, Ben Carson running for president. Ben Carson's an interesting cat, interesting character. Some of the crazy things that he's in favor of and has said and thinks. He warned in 2014 that if we continue down this path that we're going down, this pathway where everything is framed in a political sense and our representatives are not working for the people, they're working for their party, it could lead to anarchy. So he believes that, we're going to go to anarchy, which is kind of interesting. But he says that Congress should be able to remove judges for voting for marriage equality, because I don't really know why. He says that being gay is a choice, and that prison, I guess prison turns people gay. And look, I think I can jump on board with this. Let's concede prison turns people gay. We have the largest number of people in prison. Maybe we should stop locking people up. How's that? Not going there? No, I didn't think so. He claims there's no such thing as a war crime. Obamacare is worse than slavery. And, the Obama economy is depressing the economy, and it's keeping people on welfare. No, I would argue the lack of jobs is keeping people on welfare. And I would argue that, the guy who's a brain surgeon, maybe you should stick to brain surgery, because some of this stuff just seems kind of crazy. And I really, honestly, truthfully, worried about where we're heading as a nation. We can poke fun at these folks who've come out, and I will, because it makes this job a whole lot easier. But the scary thing about it is this the best we can do as a nation? Is this the best that one of the major parties in this country can come up with? Or has that party gone so far to the radical extreme that this is who they really are? I got to tell you, if that's the case, we're in worse trouble than even I think. Sad stuff. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We gotta get organized. We gotta do it today. No more madness and fury. No more misery. We gotta get organized.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Climate change is real. It's caused by human activity.
Senator Bernie Sanders, climate hawk, enters the 2016 presidential race.
The drought isn't the only environmental issue Southern California is facing right now.
Thanks to fossil fuels, California still has the nation's dirtiest air. New study finds most extreme heat waves are caused by global warming.
What?
Plus, Pope Francis wants the world to protect God's creation, and the right-wing Heartland Institute wants him to knock it off.
All of those knockoffs and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Do members of the Republican Party believe in science?
No, Bernie, they do not.
Do they respect what the scientific community is telling us in climate change?
No, Bernie.
Are they going to learn from that?
They are not.
Or do they choose to be deniers?
Yes, Bernie, that last choice. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, from my count, we now have 6 major candidates declaring to run for president for the 2016 election.
Yep, Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, makes it number 6. He officially announced he is running for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2016 this week. But unlike the Republicans who have already announced their candidacies, Sanders is a climate hawk. Here he is recently on MSNBC.
Climate change is real. It's caused by human activity. It is already, as we all know, causing devastating problems. And if we don't transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, it's only going to get worse. That is not Bernie Sanders. That is what the scientific community is telling us.
So if I've got this right, on the Republican side, we've got Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and Jeb Bush, kinda, sorta, having declared their run for the nomination. 3 of those Republicans are out-and-out deniers. Jeb Bush is sounding like maybe he's not a denier.
But he's still a denier because he doesn't believe in doing anything about it.
Well, there's that. And then on the Democratic side, we have Hillary Clinton, not a denier, and Bernie Sanders, who's an independent, but I guess he's going to become a Democrat now to run. Bernie Sanders, definitely not a denier. He has been actually one of the best folks in Congress fighting to take climate action amidst this climate crisis.
Yes, and it'll be interesting to see if he is just entering the race in order to push Hillary Clinton more to the left, or if he actually is going to make it through to the nomination.
Well, he says he's going to, he's in this thing to win it, but if he ends up pushing Hillary to be more of a climate hawk, I think that can only be a good thing.
Yep. Meanwhile, the planet continues to ignore politics. A new study concludes global warming is increasing the odds of extremely hot days. It's the first study to estimate how climate change is already influencing some types of extreme weather. It finds that 75% of extremely hot days worldwide can be explained by human-caused global warming.
Isn't that almost the most obvious headline ever, that hot days caused by global warming?
Yes, you would think so, but this study is the first to actually prove it. More than 1 in 4 Americans live with dirty air. That's according to the American Lung Association, which released its annual State of the Air report this week. The top 7 cities for worst air quality are all in California.
Hey, we're number 1.
The dirty air is caused by what you see behind me. Freeways, not only that, major roadways, ports, and also trucking centers. These are all considered pollution hotspots.
Now, it's no coincidence that pollution hotspots on the list are all areas where major industrial facilities are located. The top 3 most polluted are in California's oil patch around Bakersfield and Fresno, and the neighborhoods near the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, which combined are one of the largest ports in the world. But the cleanest air is in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Sounds nice.
Some good news. The air quality is getting slightly better in Utah. The state's oldest, most polluting coal-fired power plant has finally been shut down for good.
Aw, sad trombone.
Of course, the owners waited to shut it down until one day before new rules limiting mercury pollution took effect because they didn't want to pay to clean up the plant's operations.
So it was the EPA once again forcing a coal-fired power plant out of business.
And to stop polluting the fish.
Tyranny.
Finally, Pope Francis hosted a climate change conference at the Vatican in Rome this week in advance of his major upcoming encyclical that will call on Catholics around the world to protect creation by protecting the environment and acting on climate change as a moral responsibility. But that was just too much for the climate science deniers at the right-wing, fossil fuel-funded Heartland Institute. Some of the big stars of the anti-science denialist club traveled to Rome to, quote, dissuade Pope Francis from lending his moral authority to the politicized and unscientific climate agenda of the United Nations.
Oh, I'm sure that worked out very well. How'd it go?
They were promptly escorted out of the proceedings.
So once again, the Catholic Church doesn't want to hear the truth. I got it. Thank you for clarifying. For much more on that story and the other ones we had no time for today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Organizing America 3 hours each night. The Rick Smith Show.
I tip my hat to the new Constitution. Take a bow for the new revolution. Sliding free with the change all around. Pick up my guitar and bass. Just like yesterday. Then I'll get on my knees and pray. We don't get fooled again.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Today's Rumble in the Jungle. College kids, which side you going to take? Which side are you on? College kids, college students, the future of our nation, or Duck Dynasty? That was the choice, evidently, in Louisiana, as Bobby Jingle Jangle Jindal decided that screw those college kids. Schmuck Dynasty needed their $415,000 per episode tax break. And, we're going to cut a little bit of that education money. Don't need it at a time when evidently Louisiana, I guess it's Louisiana State University, is about ready to go insolvent, about ready to close campuses. I don't know that's such a good thing, but at least you can have your Schmuck Dynasty and the guys with the beard and the funny little clothes who dress up and act the part. Yeah, there you go. And spew their, never mind. Anyway, and the thing that gets me is you look at these budget cuts, these massive, painful budget cuts, and who does it hurt? At the end of the day, it hurts working class families and it hurts students the most. And last week I heard this story that, just one of those things you go, really? In this day and age, we're still talking about starving college students. That's why we're going to bring on our good friend, Editor Zero from the Raging Chicken Press, Kevin Mahoney. Kevin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, anytime, Rick. Happy Monday once again. Here we are.
Yeah, well, which side are you on? You on the side of Schmuck Dynasty or those things, those kids?
I'm on the other side of the Schmuck Dynasty people, that's for sure.
That's because you're not
I'm
a
on the
fan,
side of
are
people.
you?
What's that?
It's because you're not a fan, are you?
I am not a fan, not a fan of the big beard, duck call dynasty. Not a fan of that whole deal. No, I think I'd like to keep it real and keep it with the people who need, the people that are working hard every single day, just trying to make ends meet, looking for a better future. Not these people that are looking to tear it down and complain about how everyone's taken what little they have away from them.
And I look at this $415,000 per episode tax break that Schmuck Dynasty gets. I think we could feed a lot of college students. We could pay some tuition. We could do a whole bunch of stuff with that other than putting on a dumb TV show.
Do you think?
I do. I'm pretty sure about that.
I don't know, Rick. You got to check your math again on that. We got to bring in some experts. We got to bring some trade advisors and people like that to figure that out. That seems too simple to me.
Corporate lobbyists, maybe. All right. So last week, you guys over at the Raging Chicken Press broke the story of food banks popping up on college campuses, and as I think you pointed out in the story, this is something that's been growing over the years, right?
It's incredible. It really is. I've read a couple stories that have crept up over the past couple years. There was an article in the Washington Post last April in 2014 about the kind of growing number of college students who were hungry on a kind of a fairly regular basis. We're having trouble, having at least a meal a day for an entire week on a fairly regular basis. But last week it came right at home. Got an email from Leah Casellia. She's the director of the Office of Student Involvement at Kutztown University, saying that there was a group of 17 students who were interested in starting a project that would basically set up a food bank on the campus. And so Leah, I've worked with her before, and she's, wanted to help them out. So she said, okay, we're going to find some information out about it. And what she got back was she was astonished by. She said the need was so great that she couldn't just not do anything. And she found out that on a regular basis, students at Kutztown University, lots of students at Kutztown University were going hungry. And so this food bank idea that was being started by the 17 students was responding to a real need. And let me give you a sentence. What kind of just made me stop is this is some of the quotes that she got back from the student respondents to her email looking for need. And one student who said, I found that I increase my smoking because it makes me feel full. I'll spend $5 on a pack of cigarettes that will keep me full for multiple meals instead of buying 3 packs of ramen. Another student says it makes it hard to interact knowing that everyone around you gets to eat and you don't. It is painful and it puts a strain on friendships. And then someone else, I've been losing weight from the result of eating just once a day. And it goes on. And this is an image of what's happening on college campuses. And it's a growing number that's happening on college campuses, a growing situation that's happening on college campuses, in part because you've got, college costs are going through the roof. States are gutting funding to public universities, forcing students to rely more on working and relying more on loans just to get by, cutting corners here and there in order to kind of reach out to try to grab that promise of higher education. There's also more low-income students and first-generation students coming to college because we've sold them all the bill of goods. We've sold them all the idea that if you come and you get to college, this is the way to your future, right? And where it's also kind of underscored by low wages. They found that most of these students, this is not just at Kutztown, but this is across the country, most of the students that are experiencing hunger, or like that they like to call it food insecurity, they were working on an average of 18 hours a week. So these are not lazy kids. These are folks struggling to get by. And it's a very different picture of what you get in the mainstream media or what you get from Hollywood about what actually happens on college campuses.
Yeah, because, as I thought about this, that frame of, well, you're a college student. You're supposed to go without. You're supposed to, to drive a crummy car. You're supposed to eat ramen noodles 3 times a week. I think of the one Allstate commercial where, the girl, my diet is, ramen noodles 3 times a week kind of budget. We're talking not even getting that, right?
Yeah, we're talking where students are not able to even have a single meal a day, that they might get a paycheck from working their minimum wage job, and after they pay for books, right, after they pay for rent, after they pay for, maybe the first couple meals, the first part of the week, they can't make it to the end. So they're looking for ways to cut corners, and these food pantries are popping up all over the country. The first one that was ever started was at Michigan State way back in 1993, and it was a slow growth. But even if you just look since the recession, right, since the Great Bush depression in 2008. In 2008, there were 4 student food banks in the country. Right. By last spring, 2014, there was 121.
Wow.
And that number keeps on growing every single year. And to give you a sample of this is, again, the other image that comes to people's mind is like, okay, maybe this is on, those colleges, universities that are working, in the inner cities or in those rural areas, the community colleges. And yes, sure, there are community colleges that have started these food banks. Like, for example, Montgomery County Community College, they have the one at their main campus and one in their Bluebell campus and one in Pottsville, right? But Penn State University also has a food bank, which has been running now for a couple of years. So you're seeing needs across the spectrum. This is not just happening at the kind of the schools that serve the poorest students. It's happening at your kind of Division I, your kind of really strong major research institutions as well.
So let me ask you this, because you're talking about college students who work 18 hours a week. Is there nothing that the welfare system can do? I mean, to have hungry people in this country, the wealthiest country in the world, seems kind of wrong. Shouldn't we be looking into maybe how we get folks who are students, who are struggling, maybe access to food stamps or some kind of program that would help, or even the campuses, heaven forbid, have some kind of a cut down meal program, something?
Absolutely. But here's the deal, is that we actually, after we published the article, there was some folks that were commenting about, hey, listen, and I got some emails, some personal emails that were saying, listen, most college students don't know that they qualify for food stamps. They could get food stamps. But the truth of the matter is different. Some students may qualify for food stamps, but most college students do not. Right. So even those students who would say, okay, we're going to push past the shame and all that kind of garbage that you have to go through in order to kind of bring yourself to say, listen, okay, I need help. Even those students that move forward, most of them don't qualify. And that has to do in part because they might have work study grants, there might be provisions under the way that their financial aid works that they don't qualify. So really what it comes down to is two things. Like if you look at, for example, like households in the United States, you're looking at between about 15 and 16% of the households in the U.S. are those households, people in those households go hungry on a regular basis. The quote unquote food insecure. The rate at college and students, one Oregon State University study found that on their campus, right, this is right outside the capital of Oregon, on their campus, 59% of college students were food insecure on a fairly regular basis, right? And that comes in part because they're disconnected from some of the resources that they might be able to access directly in their community. And the college and universities have not been equipped and have not even been tracking this issue until really recently.
Yeah. It's another, in my view, another failure of the campuses, because we still think about college students as dependent on their parents and their families, and I guess this is another one of those things that families are struggling to put their kids into college and get them in and keep them there. It's just another indicator of how tough things have gotten, because I would argue in large part the assault on education funding, not just here in Pennsylvania but all across the country.
Well, absolutely. And this is exactly where I wanted to go, because I was going to say is on the one hand, yes, it is the fault of colleges and universities for not tracking this stuff, not paying attention to these things. But the real culprit here are those folks that are sitting in our state capitals that have been gutting public education little by little, the slow bleed for several decades now. Right? It's the kind of stuff that sneaks up on you. And I've spoken, I've spoken to a bunch of folks at here at Kutztown University. I've put out emails to every single other PASHA university because I want to see what's happening, what they're tracking this on their campuses. I haven't got any responses yet back, but hopefully you'll get some soon. But the thing is there's a lot of these very hardworking people that are working with at-risk students, first-generation students, and this wasn't even on their radar, right? And they're saying, oh my God, how do we let it slip by? And my response back has been, well, look, it's been a gradual process of austerity and cuts for several decades now. It sneaks up on you. It's not something that was in one fell swoop and then boom, now everybody's hungry. No, this has been slowly eating away at our kind of public support for our students, just as we're shifting the cost burden of college onto their backs and onto their families' backs.
Sad stuff. But the question then becomes, how do we turn this around? And I look to 2016, and we were talking about, the clown car of Republican candidates that are, just pushing their poison. On the other side of it, would Hillary be much better? Would Bernie be that much better? I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll tell you at this point, I'm all in for Bernie. I mean, Bernie's got the right message. Bernie is the only candidate now in the entire presidential field that is looking at the root causes of all these problems, about the erosion of our democracy, about the handing over our public resources to the privateers and profiteers. He's got a laser focus on what these trade deals, the TPP and all their previous cousins have done to this country and countries around the world for that matter. And he's one that has consistently, ever since he's been involved in public life, has been squarely focused on the impact of policy on everyday working folks, right? And the thing is like, people are going to have the back and forth about, whether or not he can win and, is he in it just to kind of push the issues? And I think like number one, it's already a win to have him in the race, number one, so that these issues are going to be talked about. Like they've never been talked about in a presidential campaign in decades, right? If that. Right. So that's the one thing. And, and like it or not, here we are sitting in the U.S. Right. I have friends overseas who say, why guys, don't start a third party. I'm like, yeah, that would be great. But until then, I'm going to live in the real world now and having to figure out how do we make things happen within this structure. So this presidential primary process really is our third, fourth party process right now. Right. We get a chance to influence which direction that these parties go. Right. And so, I'm going to work hard for Bernie because I think he's bringing home the message of everything that I care about. When I'm thinking down the road, I have a 6-year-old and I have a 3-year-old, and I'm looking down to the future that I want them to be part of. Right. He's got the message I want to hear.
Yeah.
And he's, I think, the best hope. And at the very least, right, the issues that he's going to bring forward, right, have the ability to have all of us stand forward and say, we're going to demand this of our government. All right, we're going to demand this and see that, if we stand up and we work together, these things are possible. And so that's where my hope's going.
Yeah, and maybe it's possible not to have college campuses where people are going hungry. And maybe it's possible to have communities where people who want jobs get them, and communities that are sustaining. Just maybe we can dream, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just unconscionable what's going on right now, and it's got to stop. And frankly, we're not moving fast enough. It's got to move like at lightning speed. Otherwise, the whole game is going to collapse. And you know what? If I can get behind Bernie and that message can get out there, and we start getting off our butts and start getting out there in the streets, then I'm all for it.
There you go. Kevin Mahoney, editor zero of The Raging Chicken Press. You can go to their website from ours, thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Kevin's name, take you right there. Kevin, great talking with you. Look forward to seeing you back here on Monday.
You got it. See you next week, Rick.
Thanks so much. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Businessmen got richer, they laid their future plans. They saw that food was everything to man. And maybe then they had a thought to help the poorest folks, but it only brought more money to their hands. And the poor keep getting poorer, people turn away, not equal to a nickel way they planned. It's taking all the soul away from everything we grew, and they can't find the legs on which to stand.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
It's well known that harsh climate conditions can mess with your mind, from cabin fever to heat delirium. But America is now experiencing an even more dangerous disease called climaticus non-vocalism extremism. CNE syndrome almost exclusively afflicts a narrow segment of our population, Republican political officials and candidates. It might stem from a genetic defect, but scientists say more study is needed on that. Symptoms include an obsessive impulse by GOP politicos to deny that human-caused climate change is happening, often accompanied by a feverish insistence that government employees be banned from discussing it. Hard to believe? For an example of climaticus non-vocalism extremism, look at Governor Scott Walker's Wisconsin administration. The Koch-funded governor and Republican presidential wannabe is an ardent climate change denier, but the state's Public Lands Board has escalated his denial to Orwellian censorship. The 2 GOP commissioners on the 3-member board, which oversees the ecological health of thousands of acres of Wisconsin forest lands, have banned agency employees from even considering damage caused by climate change. Worse, they have such a severe case of CNE syndrome that they've imposed a gag order on freedom of speech by public lands employees, prohibiting them from talking about climate change while on the job. The heartbreak of CNE is that its victims deny that they're in denial about the disease. Thus, the Wisconsin duo say that their no speech rule is not censorship because employees are still free to talk about climate change at home or even chit-chat about it by the water cooler, just as they might talk about sports. This is Jim Hightower saying, Governor Walker, who wants to be your president, says that he finds that censorship perfectly reasonable.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery for this war is one you're bound to lose. Are you fascist? Goodbye.
I'm sure this is something that the senator from, or the, I don't know why I keep calling him senator, now governor and second-term governor in Kansas, Sam Brownback Mountain. He went to dinner, wasn't expecting to get a tip from the waitress because the waitress evidently handed him his receipt. Where you put the tip. She wrote, instead of giving her a tip, she wrote, "Tip the schools." And there's something seriously wrong when waitresses who make $2.13 an hour under the federal law, it's something wrong with them saying, hey, take the tip money you would have given me and give it to my local school. Now, this woman, Chloe Hugh, I guess she wasn't, really looking to make trouble, but a lot of news around this. She posted the receipt on Facebook, which got a bunch of response. And I look at Brownback, another one of these right-wing governors that, slash and burn. Because as I was reading, I think something like, here in Pennsylvania, it took like $1 billion from public education. Brownback's been right there. In fact, they've got a budget shortfall after a couple of years of slashing and burning of still $344 million. Now he's back to doing the right-wing, hey, let's give them block grant ideas. Let's cut funding and then give the schools block grant, and they could do whatever they want, and they could choose not to feed their children. I got to tell you, it's just nuts to me.
It takes a lot of courage for that waitress to do what she did, to tell the governor to start tipping the schools. I want to know I personally want to know what the hell he felt afterwards. After you get that on your check, you're not really expecting that little surprise, are you?
Yeah, well, she's a waitress there at Boss Hogs Barbecue. HAWG for hog, Boss Hogs Barbecue. And she said, I just knew I had to say something or I'd regret it. And that's really what we have to do in our political process. When you get these moments, make your statement. Now, this is a very real person who's saying, look, I don't like what you've done to my local public school. I don't like what you've done to my children's opportunity. We've got to hammer people like Brownback on this.
And look what happened with Rauner going after the autism funding in Illinois, where he just got leveled by people from all across the spectrum for going after children with autism and trying to cut that. And then they magically found $50 million searching through the sofa cushions over the weekend. I wonder how that worked.
But that's what it's going to take, though, right? I mean, it takes outrage. It takes people in the streets. It takes, I'm looking right now out in Los Angeles. As we speak, they're adding another drayage company to the port out there in Los Angeles, who is a union company, and they say we want labor peace. And they're really pushing labor peace out there. Why? Because people are in the streets demanding change. So what comes out of that is we would just like labor peace. We should be doing this on education. We should have kids in the street screaming, hey, I want my funding.
I know. Look what we did in Pennsylvania for the past 4 years with Governor Corbett. Ever since the day ever since he proposed those cuts to the higher education and public education systems, people were following around the state for 3.5 years after that, and that's what it took to get him out of office.
Well, and good riddance. Glad he's down in South Carolina with Nikki Haley, or wherever he's at, as long as he's not here. Anyway, you miss any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. Make sure you get the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me here, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back with hour 3. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, time to talk.
Together, we can make America better. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Striking port truckers were joined Thursday by San Diego area allies in ambulatory picketing at Toyota. The picketing targeted Toyota cargo being hauled from the ports to Toyota plants in Mexico. The demand was to end wage theft. The striking short-haul port truckers in Los Angeles and Long Beach also want to be classified as employees, not independent contractors. Port truck driver Julio Garcia says being misclassified means business costs are shifted to workers, including some illegal wage theft.
We want to stop the illegal deductions that the companies are making in checks every Friday. So I'm tired about that. All my friends are tired. I need benefits, and I raising the voice because I want the company to reclassify me. I want to be an employee. Everybody says that I'm an employee, so I want to be treated as it is.
A middle-class health benefits tax repeal act is being introduced in Congress by Representative Joe Courtney. It would eliminate a tax set to hit high-quality health care plans. Teamsters President Jim Hoffa says the bill stands up for working Americans. The tax is scheduled to take effect in 2018 and could be as much as 40% on benefits often negotiated by unions. Supporters of the tax say it will only apply to overly generous health plans, whatever that means. Seattle Council member Kshama Sawant was in court Thursday for disorderly conduct charges against her and other activists stemming from a November protest against Alaska Airlines. Sawant says the airline is refusing to comply with the CTAC vote mandating a $15 minimum wage and other worker rights. Sawant says instead of putting protesting activists on trial, it's Alaska Airlines that should be on trial for its poverty wages. She says 500 days after the minimum wage law took effect, workers at SeaTac Airport have yet to get the raise that they fought for and that the voters approved. AFL-CIO Secretary-Treasurer Liz Shuler says American workers are suffering these days from severe economic inequality as the presidential election season approaches. Shuler says the nation can't afford it anymore, and politicians running for office must be committed to raising wages and making the economy work for workers.
Most of America is working in an economy that is tilted toward corporations and the super rich, and that has to end. That has to end. America cannot afford it anymore.
This newscast made possible in part through support from the National Association of Letter Carriers and from ULICO, the Union Labor Life Insurance Company. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Tin soldiers and Nixon coming. We're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming. For dead in Ohio. Gotta get down to it. Soldiers are cutting us down. Should have been done long ago. What if you knew her and found her dead on the ground? How can you run when you know?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So it was 45 years ago today, the massacre at Kent State happened. And, it's one of those black eyes in the history of our history books, but something that we absolutely have to remember, which is why when Pat LaMarche told me she was going to be out at Kent State, I said, you know what, let's get a report from on the ground, what's happening today there and the way things are. Pat, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thanks for having me, Rick. This is a really interesting anniversary. Not only was it a full moon last night, but the 30th, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, which were the big days at Kent State, all fell on the same day of the week. So May 4th was a Monday 45 years ago. April 30th, the day that President Nixon announced he was going to invade Cambodia, which, oh, by the way, he was already bombing for a year, was the trigger to all the huge protests. And that April 30th was a Thursday. And then May 1st, when the first protests happened, and you and I probably know more conspiracy theorists between the two of us than 100 other people do.
Yep.
But the people who believe that the government every now and then sets us up for a fight, well, they're in full force talking about what happened to play out in the days before Kent State, because there were 200 or so, not National Guard, but ROTC armories at universities across the country that were set fire to. And one was set fire to at Kent State, and an awful lot of people believe that it was set fire to by operatives and not by the Kent State students. But that was the thing that the government used as the necessity to call out the military.
Right, to come put the National Guard on the campuses. I also, one of the other conspiracies I heard is they were all supposed to have rubber bullets. How is it that, these certain ones didn't?
They weren't supposed to have any bullets. They were supposed to, if they had not been nationalized, which they had been by the governor, so that they could put down a labor union unrest a few days earlier, they weren't supposed to have any bullets. But because they were still nationalized, they had live ammunition in their guns.
That's an interesting, that's an interesting bit of history that I had completely forgotten. They were actually there, I think, the UAW, right?
Right. And Joe Lewis, who was the only person at Kent State who was shot twice and miraculously survived, is a huge AFSCME supporter. So on top of the fact that he's like living Kent State every year of his life over and over and over again, he was also there, a pretty heavy labor supporter, which shows that it was all the same group of people, the same sort of lower middle class people who were just trying to make their lives better. Every one of them had an education deferment so that they didn't have to go to Vietnam, but they were sticking up for the people who were being forced to go to Vietnam.
Right, all their former classmates from high school and their friends and neighbors that were being forced into it. And the sad reality is it's always the poor who fight these wars. I remember as a kid growing up in the projects, the only people that I ever saw with the military garb on were people who were broken or had addiction problems or mental health, what we now call PTSD. There were tons of those people.
Man, there were people with PTSD there today too. I was kind of shocked. I have always wanted to go to Kent State. I was 9 when it happened. And yet this is the first time I've gone. And I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect hundreds of people who were there that day. And that was what was there. I guess I thought the 9 guys who got shot might be there, and the families of the 4 who died.
Right.
But there were so many people there that had been there protesting that day. The protest was out in front of the journalism school building. That's why there were so many photographs. And every single person I spoke to, with the exception of one, Dean, the gentleman who was shot and paralyzed for life, he's the only person that graduated from Kent State. All of them tried to come back. All of them tried to finish school, but all of them ended up back out again. Just couldn't handle being there.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine, that kind of trauma that would have that would have a lasting effect. And how are they today?
Well, it's interesting. There was one man who ended up finishing his education at Oberlin College.
Just down the road.
Yeah, he has been to 36 of the May 4th commemorations, 36 out of 45. And I interviewed him a number of times. And when I saw him at the end of the day, he was weeping. And I said, "Are you okay?" Now, this is a big, tough guy. He's like you. You're a big guy like you. Doesn't look like he'd be too easy to push around. And he said, "I got to have children. I got to have children." That guilt, that survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
it's just, and he was one of the guys who was shot at but not hit.
Right. So let me ask you.
Joe Lewis was pretty remarkable. He's the guy who was shot twice.
Right.
And he testified in the lawsuit against Ohio. And when he was sitting there testifying, and then they called out the two National Guardsmen who shot him, and they got to testify. And the first guy said, well, he flipped me off with one hand, and he had a gun in the other, which of course wasn't true. There were no guns there. And Joe Lewis said, oh, no, I didn't. I flipped him the bird with both hands.
Which, the question then becomes, you look at what's going on in places like Baltimore and, Ferguson and other places where we're still seeing, unarmed people being shot down in our streets. It's nothing new, obviously, but I think something that's almost hit epidemic levels at this point.
Well, that was really a big topic, all over the lawn, there's just another grassy knoll. It seems like every time you go to a massacre, there's a grassy knoll. But that was a big topic of conversation, was if there had been any transparency, if there had been any consequence to the leadership that caused this massacre and caused this horrible, like you said, blemish on the history of the United States, maybe we wouldn't still be hearing about it. Maybe it wouldn't still be happening. Maybe unarmed people wouldn't be getting gunned down if the second soldier who shot Joe Lewis, when they asked him why he shot Joe Lewis, he said, well, everybody else was shooting him. It's really remarkable. And you can actually read these testimonies.
Wow.
I'll have a story up on my page at the Huffington Post by the end of the week, and there'll be links to these testimonies. You can read them.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing.
Stuff.
So how's the university handling this? I mean, it's been 45 years, and I remember growing up in the greater Cleveland area, and you always knew about the Kent State shooting, and it was always part of it. And, it was whenever you visited Kent State, and I've been there a number of times, you always went by where the shooting happened. How's the university handle this, and has it changed over the years?
Well, there are a couple of things that I guess I'm too Pollyanna for my own good. The 4 parking lot spaces where the 4 who died were killed, they are little memorials, and there's little speed bumps so you can't park on them. But then you still can park right next to them, right? And I'm like, really? You couldn't even close the parking lot? You had to maintain the parking spaces of the rest of the parking lot. Well, where's the respect for this?
Well, at least they didn't sell it to corporate sponsors and have a such and such parking spot brought to you by.
Right.
So, you could see that happening, right?
Yeah, I really could. Well, that's the other thing is all the property around Kent State is much younger than 45 years old, and it's all capitalism. It's all Burger King, McDonald's, Five Guys. And I had asked one of them on the march, do you remember what used to be out here? What used to be around Kent State? Because it's all probably 20-year-old, and they can't remember. They went to school on this campus. It's like this trauma that has robbed certain mundane or ordinary aspects of their memory out of them.
They can't remember because there was nothing there, Pat. I mean, it was in the middle of it was in the middle of almost nowhere.
The president spoke today, though, the new president of the university. She was just sworn in about 3 days ago. And a president of Kent State has never spoken at one of the commemorations.
Wow.
So that's a big change.
That is a big change.
And she apologized. And no one from Kent State has ever apologized before.
Does the history of Kent State and the shooting, do you think in any way hinder their recruitment, hinder students coming there? Because I honestly don't remember, when I was looking at colleges, that being something as a kid that was in the front of our head. Is that something in the front of people's heads today?
I talked to a senior there who is in the journalism program, and I asked her if she even hesitated to go, and she said no. And then I talked to a sophomore there who I think he's a phys ed major, and I asked him about it. And he said, he really didn't know about it when he applied. And I thought, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. And then he said that in their freshman class now, everybody entering school has to be taught about it. But then when he was telling me about what he learned, that it was equal guilt on both sides, I said, really, that's what you were taught about it? And he said, well, yeah, the kids shouldn't have set fire to the ROTC building. And I said, well, did you know that no one was ever charged for that? That they have absolutely no evidence that any of the students set the fire, and that never even went to court. That was just sort. And he said, no, I had no idea. I was just told that the students set fire to it.
And we got the four that did it.
Yeah, exactly. Laurel Krause was there. Her sister Allison Krause was one of the four. And she talked about how when they went to identify Allison's body, and the only reason they went to the hospital to identify her body was because they heard that she was dead on the radio. Nobody from the school called them, and nobody from the government called them.
Wow.
And there were men with guns but no uniforms outside the room with Allison laying there on the slab. And the two men that stood there said they should have shot more. So there's some pretty heavy scars, and some 45 years later, there are some people who still want some justice. They really seriously want something to happen about. They don't need even punishment anymore. They just want the truth.
Yeah. And what happened to the soldiers who did the shooting?
Nothing.
The more
Even
things
though they
change.
testified, yeah, I know, exactly.
You know, and I think about this, and, you know, I've been thinking about this all day today, and it's one of those moments that, you know, I'm sure as a nation we'd like to forget, but as a nation, I think we need to remember these moments more than ever now, as I keep hearing the ramp up of the same kind of mentality, especially when you look at Baltimore. I ran into 5 people over the weekend who said, we should just go in there and shoot them all, which is, you know, just kind of mind blowing coming from working class people who, you know, you go back and you learn labor's history. That's what we used to do to workers. And in fact, that's what we were threatening to do in 1970 before they went after the students at Kent State. It's scary stuff, Pat.
You know, all I could think of, Rick, was Haymarket. You know, it was Haymarket again. And blaming the workers for the violence, which wasn't their fault, right? That's what I was thinking of when I was there. And Joe Lewis, I keep going back to him, but it was really remarkable to speak to him. One of the things I thought was so neat about Joe Lewis was he was one of the people who dropped out of college and just couldn't bear the thought of going back. He said, you know, if Kent State wanted to do something for me, they could let me finish my education. Isn't that kind of a no-brainer?
One would think, yeah.
Yeah. He said he'd like to do distance learning. He doesn't know if he'd ever want to be on the campus again. But he'd like to have a degree after all these years and after all he went through and after being shot and the bullet ricocheting off his spine and coming out the other hip and, you know, getting shot again by a guy who thought, well, everybody else was shooting him. But thinks you can let him take a science class, for God's sake, you know, university.
At least. Now, were they ever, you know, did they ever get anything? I mean, at some point, you go, were there lawsuits filed? Were anything? I mean, other than just being shot, did this guy get anything out of it?
Actually, there was a professor and 25 students that are called the Kent State 25. Well, the professor and 24 students, Kent State 25, who were all charged with crimes like treason. And I didn't even know that until this weekend.
No, I just thought it was a professor. I thought it was a professor that they tried to call him radical and all of this stuff. I didn't realize there were students involved.
Yeah, and 24 students. One of the guys who was shot and survived, his sister, who was also at the school, like all of these guys were brought up in charges. And it wasn't until all of those charges were dismissed, and then they turned around and they asked the state of Ohio for the right to sue them for what they did to them, and the state of Ohio said, no.
No.
So then they took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, you can't sue them. And so all they could do then was a civil suit. And you know what Allison Krause's parents got for her life?
I don't even want to guess. Tell me.
$15,000
Jeez.
for her life. For the rest of her life. For 19 to 75. That's all it was worth. $15,000. And I think maybe the most interesting man was Keene, the man who was shot and paralyzed. Because he's the only person I talked to who finished school. He's the only person I talked to who graduated from Kent. And he's a lifetime alum. He's a lifetime alum. And I kind of chuckled when he told me that. And I said, really, you like the school that much? That you want to be a lifetime alum? And he said, well, I really only had one bad day there.
That's actually funny.
I know. I laughed. I'm like, really? Yeah, it was just like that one bad day.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. Let me ask you a last line of question, because I've been seeing, in some of the things that I've been reading, I've been seeing the martyr word thrown around an awful lot. Were these martyrs?
I think that their names should be on the Vietnam War Memorial. I think they were soldiers, and their weapon was peace. But they were fighting for the same reason that people went to Vietnam. They were sent there for the wrong reasons, but they thought they were going to make the United States a better place. And that's why all soldiers fight. They want everything to be better and safer, and that's what these 4 kids died for. They didn't want their peers dying in a rice paddy, and they didn't want their peers killing somebody in a rice paddy. And so they put their lives on the line. And I think they're heroes.
I'm right there with you. Pat, I appreciate the time. I look forward to your piece over at Huffington Post on your experience there. And I look forward to you coming back to the mean streets of Carlisle here and getting together with you.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks so much,
Have
Pat.
a great day.
You too. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We gotta get organized. We gotta do it today. No more madness and fury. No more misery. We gotta get organized.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. This was one of the most significant days in U.S. labor history. A mass meeting of workers was called for that night in Chicago's Haymarket Square. The purpose of the meeting was to protest the police brutality that had killed and injured strikers at the McCormick Reaper plant the day before. Rally organizers were part of the movement demanding an 8-hour day. The rally was much smaller than organizers had expected. Rain began to fall as the last speaker was finishing when an army of 200 policemen appeared demanding the meeting disperse. Someone, unknown to this day, threw a dynamite bomb into the ranks of the advancing police. In the confusion of the moment, police began firing their weapons indiscriminately into the dark. When the smoke cleared, police had killed at least 4 in the crowd and wounded many more. A total of 7 policemen were killed. Most were killed by their own gunfire. In the aftermath of the event, unions were raided all across the country. The 8-hour movement was effectively derailed. 8 men were put on trial in Chicago. Some were not even present at the time the bomb was thrown. They were put on trial for their ideas. 4 of the men, Albert Parsons, August Spies, George Engel, and Adolf Fisher, were sentenced to death by hanging. A 5th man, Louis Ling, died under mysterious circumstances in prison. The remaining 3 went to prison and were eventually pardoned by Illinois Governor Altgeld in 1893. Before he was hung, August Spies declared, "The day will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you strangle today." His words proved true. The Haymarket Martyrs inspired and continue to inspire labor activists throughout the world. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
Within the vast competition of the American free enterprise system lies the very competitive business of lawmaking. Just as corporations and businesses are free to compete for their share of the marketplace, so too can government entities compete against one another to draw more profits for their territory. By the early 1900s, the state of Nevada had a declining mining industry and was steadily losing population and economic growth. The only good fortune, it seemed, was the nation's advancement of relatively cheap transportation, such as more comfortable railroads and the automobile, which allowed the western states to lure some of the American population their way. One of the most successful early legislative ploys came from creative minds in Nevada. They needed a little luck to make it happen, but it did happen. Join us again next time to see what innovative idea Nevada hatched to improve their condition. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Exposing GOP hypocrisy. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm so in love with you. Whatever you want to do.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Pennsylvania State Senator Patrick Brown. Little trouble. Evidently, from the reports that I'm reading and that I'm hearing, Senator Brown went a little tip in the bottle, had a couple of drinks, then decided to go for a motorcycle ride, at which point he crashed. Reports are right now that he's in intensive care, recovering with considerable injuries. Don't know what that is, and I wish him nothing but the best. I hope that he heals quickly. I hope that it's nothing permanent and lasting, but I also hope he ends up in jail over it. This would be the third crash and DUI that he would have had if he's charged with the DUI, which is what the reports are that I'm hearing, that this was a drunk driving related type incident. He was convicted in 1995 of a crash, which he was charged with drunk driving, and a 1999 motorcycle crash, also charged. And it's one of these things. Okay, you've had 2 DUIs, the potential of a third. All are crashes. Couldn't keep the bike up, couldn't keep the car between the lanes. All crashes. How many times potentially do you think he got away with drunk driving? Now, understand, I agree. I absolutely, positively, 100% agree with Representative Mike Schlossberg, the Democratic representative from that area, that we shouldn't be mocking Senator Brown's struggle with alcohol. We shouldn't be doing that. And I'm not. All I'm saying is that he should be treated like the rest of us. Because understand, when he was in the House of Representatives here, he voted to make the penalties much more stringent, much more painful, much more, criminal. And I would argue that, the senator probably does battle with demons with alcohol, and we should get him treatment, of which he has had once before after a crash. But here's the thing. He's the one who voted for the penalties. He's the one who made much more severe penalties for repeat offenders. Question is, will he serve the upwards of 4 years, depending on what the blood alcohol content in his blood was? Will he serve that 4 years? And then what happens with this senatorial seat? Is he going to be able to do the Senate thing from behind bars? Or will we see the nicely, we'll give you an ankle bracelet and you can go to and from work? My problem with this is solely that the treatment, and I'm going to watch this closely, because understand the treatment that you or I would get, I'm going to guess much, much different than what the senator is going to get.
Yeah, I want to know if he's going to be able to drive out here to Harrisburg. Usually if you get your third DUI, you lose your license for a year or two, and then you have to get
18 months is mandatory.
And then you get a breathalyzer put in your vehicle. So is he going to be able to drive from Allentown to Harrisburg, which is maybe like an hour and a half, depending on how fast you go, out here? Is he going to be able to do that?
Now, according to the state's website, a third DUI would come with a first-degree misdemeanor, 18 months license suspension, 1 to 5 years in prison, $1,500 to $10,000 fine, treatment when ordered, and a 1-year ignition interlock. So for a year, you would have to blow into the little tube just to start your car. I got to tell you, if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me. It better be at the minimum what's good enough for them. Now, understand the folks at the higher end of the alcohol, and again, this goes back to, because Pennsylvania does this weird thing. Pennsylvania breaks it up into three categories. You've got the people who were 0.08 to 0.099. You're just a little drunk.
You're just a little over the line.
Just a little bit. Hey, I'm a little.
You're not hitting both sides of the side.
Feeling good.
You're not hitting both sides of the sidewalk when you're walking out of the bar.
Not yet. And then they've got a high BAC penalty, which is 0.1 to 0.159. That's you're stumbling a lot. You're tripping over stuff, And then they've got the next one that's anything 0.16 or double the legal limit and over.
And that's a DWI, right?
No, that's still DUI, driving under the influence of alcohol, or DWI, driving while intoxicated. Driving under the influence is anything. It's any drug that you may have. Driving while intoxicated is alcohol.
Oh, I thought driving while intoxicated is above a DUI.
They're the same, I guess.
Okay.
But, it is what it is. But if you blow twice the legal limit, the penalties are much, much stiffer. And it's one of those things where you go, it'll be interesting, because the last DUI he had, he was double the legal limit, according to the Morning Call.
I know. I think he should be forced to give up his Senate seat, and maybe possibly serve some jail time. I mean, as you were saying going into the show, he is a danger to the community. He's a danger to the people around him when he is driving, and it makes you wonder how many times, the cops might have stopped him and might have just followed him home. Give you that treatment from the 1970s and make sure you go back to bed.
Yep.
I mean, it just makes you wonder. I mean, this guy has 3 crashes, and they're all DUI related events.
And really for his own safety.
I mean, yeah, 2 of them are on a motorcycle. I mean, you're driving in a motorcycle. That's a little bit more of a risk than driving in a car, and then you're gonna add alcohol on top of that. You're also, what would happen if that you get into an accident and imagine you get seriously injured, and the mental state of that person who hit you because of your intoxication.
Yeah. Well, the last question I have on it is, do we the citizens of Pennsylvania get the motorcycle? Because as I understand, third
nice
DUI,
Harley Davidson.
Third DUI, they take your vehicle. So I'll be watching that. It's just one of those interesting things. But like I said, I wish him the best. I hope he heals. I hope he is not permanently injured in any way, and I hope he gets the treatment that he needs. But also, I hope that he gets the penalties that he himself voted for, and that the rest of us would get saddled with. To me, it's that simple. Very, very simple stuff. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break. If you missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Also, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Ain't gonna take it, it's our time. We want the world and we want it now. We're gonna take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Stay alive.
In 1897, miners at collieries throughout northeastern Pennsylvania's anthracite coal region had enough. Conditions were grueling and life was difficult. Miners were frequently cheated out of pay, overcharged for supplies, some they never wanted or received, forced to live in captive company-owned towns, shop at overpriced company-owned stores, even mandated to use the company doctor since fees were deducted automatically from the miners' pay. This, combined with mine owners forcing longer unpaid hours and the Anti-Immigrant Campbell Act of 1897, taxing mine owners for the use of non-native labor, drove miners to strike. Spontaneously starting in Pennsylvania's Lehigh Valley, workers marched north to get other miners to join in the struggle. Their demands were modest: a 10-cent pay raise and a reduction in the cost of gunpowder. They also wanted the freedom to shop in non-company-owned stores of their choosing and see a doctor not owned by the coal company. As the miners moved northward toward Hazleton, mine owners determined to crush the workers' protest sent their company-paid police force and strikebreakers. Local law enforcement was also on the side of mine owners. Luzerne County Sheriff James Martin, a former mine foreman, deputized 102 local men, arming them with Winchester rifles and sidearms. The group of some 400 miners marching peacefully and unarmed in rows of fours moved onward toward Latimer. Stephen Urich, joining the group outside of Hazleton, taking with him the American flag, shouted, "We have nothing to worry about because we have the American flag to protect us." Within hours and a hail of Winchester bullets, Stephen Urich was gunned down in cold blood. His beloved American flag drenched in his blood and the blood of those who lay murdered and wounded. Eyewitnesses said the sheriff and his hired killers mowed the men down like grass. More than 20 men were murdered on that September day, and more than 50 were wounded, many shot in the back in labor's forgotten massacre. The sheriff and his murderous band were tried for their part in the Latimer massacre and found not guilty of murdering 20 unarmed peaceful demonstrators. Lest we never forget, or as the wife of a miner whose life was stolen from him told her children, you can forgive, but you can't forget. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
What year did that start? It's her birthday. There we go.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So as we said earlier in the program, the clown car is filling up. 2 more names added to the roster there. Going to put in some child safety locks and some child seats there in the back seat for the former CEO of Hewlett Packard and also the brain surgeon. Should be fun. I can't wait. There's finally a Snow White. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, what do you think? The clown car filling up.
Well, tomorrow apparently Mike Huckabee is slated to announce that he's going to be entering the race. And considering the weight he's gained from the last time he ran, it's going to be a pretty cramped clown car, to say the least. So waka waka. Get it?
Yeah, I get it.
Okay. I'm chubby, so I'm not really allowed to make that joke.
Making fat jokes. All right.
Well, I'm fat too. It's cool. I'm allowed to do that.
So we're allowed to do that?
Oh my God, yeah, totally.
Okay. All right, there you go. But I mean, I look at all of these people now just throwing their hat in the ring, and it's just really now just kind of a joke because I think everyone by now has to realize it's about the money. It's about setting up these super PACs. It's about writing their crummy books or having ghostwriters do it. It's about cashing in, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's the allure of being an instant celebrity, and even if you're not really a high profile GOP candidate in the races, you still have some pretty lucrative offers ahead of you. There's like Tom Tancredo, who never really polled more than 2%, who was frankly just sort of in 2008 as sort of the out there candidate who made the most headlines for threatening to essentially aim missiles at Mecca and whatnot. And today, he sort of is one of those people on the speaker circuit in DC who will essentially show up at any sort of event for the right price and give his endorsement. I've seen him pitching everything from getting rid of the popular vote to supporting the MEK in Iran. So yeah, there's a huge sort of a log cabin or a huge kind of a cottage industry that's created by running for president, and I have a feeling that a lot of these people know that they're probably not going to win, most likely Ben Carson, but I think they're looking for that.
So why'd you pick out the black guy? What's with that?
Because he's not a serious candidate, because he has said enough ridiculous things so far to sort of disqualify himself from running. And as for Carly Fiorina, I think that she may actually think she has a chance just because she's a CEO, and with that kind of mentality, when you're surrounded by, yes men, you become sort of delusional, a la Herman Cain.
Yeah, well, she says she knows how the economy works, so we should put her in charge.
Yeah, no, she knows how the economy works, and that's going great right now. And of course, soon after she announced her candidacy, we got CarlyFiorina.org, which I urge you to check out really quickly. This is something that actually has been hijacked by somebody else who took advantage of the fact that she forgot to register that domain, and it includes a little sad face for every person that she laid off while CEO of Hewlett Packard.
Yeah,
so all 30,000 people.
Somebody who works for SEIU is the one who did it, which I thought was kind of fitting because it's deserved.
Yeah, it's clever.
But I look at all of these different candidates, and if you want to call them that, I just think that you're just cashing in. I think it's going to be a really fun election process. How are you going to fit all of these people onto one stage? I mean, all of these egos. I can't wait for the debates or whatever it is they're going to do. I mean, I look at this past Saturday, South Carolina had their Republican Party convention, and the Fab Five got together there. Santorum, Perry, Lindsey Graham, and I can't forget the other two. I'll remember in a second. But it was beautiful. Cruz was there. Jeb Bush was there. It was insanity at its best.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a pretty interesting campaign, to say the least. Right now, we, of course, have a lot of people taking aim at Jeb Bush as the sort of centrist in this, and that, of course, is going to draw some pretty strict divides within the Republican Party. The party itself has been trying to do everything they can to make this a shorter campaign season than the last time. So I would expect a kind of an early push to try to put a kibosh on some of these candidates from rising too quickly. But, these are some pretty undisciplined folks. Even Marco Rubio, who's considered sort of a mainstream candidate, has recently shown that he's essentially willing to do whatever reckless move he has to make to get a name for himself in this situation. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of people here trying to buck the party system at large and try to get their moment in the sun, which will, of course, mean that this is going to be a lot of fun.
Because they don't need the party. Honestly, I mean, as long they all seem to have a billionaire who has bought into them, who's going to fill their PACs. They're all wild cards in my view. I mean, I look at Ted Cruz, who over the weekend said, the candidates are going to be judged by what they do. This is a guy who's only proposed one piece of legislation. I mean, what'd you do?
No, that's very true. This is somebody who is new to the Senate, and really there's a lot of people in the Senate right now who are talking about what kind of precedent this is going to set in the long run. There's a lot of people essentially saying that after Ted Cruz, there may be some, look at Senate etiquette to try to dissuade people from seeking, the office of a senator just to launch a campaign within a few years. And frankly, a lot of members of the Senate are pretty offended by him moving in so soon.
Yeah, I mean, just lots of fun, and I can't wait for more of the insanity to ensue. Any ideas on other than Huckabee? Who else is jumping in? Have we got everybody? I mean, Scott Walker hasn't announced yet. Any idea who the next to join the cavalcade of crazy?
I want to say next on our list we have Lindsey Graham, who signals that he has a certain date in mind. I don't have that directly in front of me. We still are awaiting, Jeb Bush, Chris Christie, and Scott Walker, sort of the big ones who are considered to be at least reasonably, electable candidates. So that's going to be, one of those wait and see things. And of course, you could still get some dark horse people coming in here, or some other crazies who may think they have a shot. So
cannot wait.
Yep, it's going to be fun.
Cannot wait. All right, let's move on. Earlier today, we heard some reports that maybe the police had shot somebody in the back in Baltimore. Maybe they were chasing somebody. They dropped a gun, got shot. Then I heard, no, nobody got shot. What happened?
Well, we're still trying to figure that out. But according to the Baltimore Police Department, essentially there was a man who was seen with a gun in the back of his waistband. He fled the scene, apparently tossed the weapon, which then discharged. And he was then arrested and put in an ambulance out of, an abundance of caution. This was misinterpreted by a number of eyewitnesses on the scene, apparently, as him being shot in the back. Fox News, in fact, reported this, saying that, they saw him running and saw him get shot and then put in the ambulance. They've since recanted that, saying that this is sort of conflicting reports coming from everyone involved. But it looks like this was, not an incident wherein the man was shot, but it nevertheless, for a short period of time, really heightened tension over there, and shows how sort of fragile the scene is over there in Baltimore.
Yeah, interesting. Over the weekend at the big South Carolina Republican Party convention, Rick Perry spoke and said, one of the best way to prevent crime is an armed citizenry, arm everybody. I wonder which side he would fall on of the guy throwing the gun away, if he should have been allowed to open carry. And really, while you were marching the streets there during the protest here recently, what if every protester was carrying a gun?
That would be pretty shocking. I can't say that a lot of these people seem responsible enough to be, holding weapons and stuff. I would also say that about the majority of, most Americans, especially those who are convinced that there's going to be an Obama takeover, or convinced that we're coming to take said guns. And it's interesting how, of course, the NRA talks about, guns as a self-defense mechanism, but, never really mentioned what would have happened if Trayvon Martin had a gun, or if, a lot of these other, young black men in these situations were armed. And in fact, they're continuing to sort of hold up the notion of an armed gangster as sort of a boogeyman, even though, that would sort of be the fulfillment of their ultimate goal, I guess.
Yeah, if you believe the only good thing against a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, what about the 70,000 good guys with guns that they wouldn't allow into their convention?
That's a very good point, and that's something that's very shocking, and of course highlights sort of the craziness of the NRA. And this is something that's kind of gone overhaul with them. They've been talking a lot about a local report about a reporter who was apparently saved by a shop owner with a gun. This turned out to be false. The shop owner was apparently protecting his own shop, and he was in fact saved at the end of the day, protected by members of the, I believe, Crip gang, who are the very sort of boogeymen that the NRA are constantly touting as why people need to buy more guns. So, they're continuing to double down on their sort of crazy racist imagery, but it's not really surprising.
So now you were on the streets in Baltimore. I guess you almost got arrested, huh?
Yeah. At one point, we were outside of the media holding area, which is where the press was told to, gather in sort of the free speech zone. We were following a group of protesters who had defied the curfew down the street when the police forces started to move in and seal off a lot of the exits. At that point, we had decided to head back to the media area since, the idea of the curfew was you are allowed to be out if you are going to your place of business. We figured the media area was our place of business, so we would be able to make the case for why we would be able to go back there. But we ended up getting blocked off by a line of cops. The captain who actually told us to put our backs against the wall, but at no point said that we were under arrest. So we ended up just kind of wandering off and, not having to go to jail, which is a privilege that I'm fairly confident I would not have had I not been white.
So that's your white privilege. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It worked, and it pains me to say it, especially because 15 people got arrested that night for breaking curfew, as well as I believe much more the following evening. So, interesting times over there, and it really just shows how selectively this curfew was enforced.
Yeah, I really loved the free speech zone areas. I thought the whole country was a free speech zone. That First Amendment thing. I don't know. Maybe just me.
It's just absolutely crazy in Baltimore. I gotta say this honestly. I was in Ferguson, as I mentioned a lot, and for that at least we had that crazy over-militarization of the police, but that was confined to about a 2-mile stretch of road. You could leave that area and still feel like you were in America as usual. You would still feel like you were in sort of a relatively normal St. Louis. With Baltimore, this is something that I think is a much bigger deal, because you honestly had these huge Humvees, you had these armed to the teeth policemen pretty much throughout the entire city. I was at a little nice park in Fells Point when I was speaking to you on Friday, overlooking about 2 or 3, armed Humvees. And later that evening, there were, police tanks just sort of moving through the road with, sheriff written on it in big letters, even though it looks more like sort of like some kind of G.I. Joe type, machine. And it really looks like an occupied city, and it really was an occupied city in the sense that this extended through the entire city at large. And it was a little bit shocking to see people just kind of going about their lives when you had this really just terrifying scene in front of you.
Wow. You look at this stuff and you don't even know what to say half the time. I mean, I'm just stunned by what we've allowed to happen. I also noticed that Romney over the weekend claimed that Clinton's sucking up to the people in Baltimore. Does she really need to suck up to the Baltimore vote? I mean, considering what Romney got when he ran for president from the African community, the African American community, I can't imagine that she would need to do much more.
Yeah, there's not really a chance that, the Clintons aren't going to secure the African-American vote, particularly considering the last election results, and particularly considering that even though there's a lot of talk about doing some soul searching in the Republican Party and trying to expand the demographic, that there's really been no serious attempt on behalf of them to actually do that. So this is sort of a bizarre statement from Romney. And he also noted that there does not exist mass incarceration in the U.S., which is pretty shocking to say the least.
Which is kind of laughable, and I guess also it's laughable and also shows how disconnected he is.
Oh my God, exactly, and it's also weird because this isn't something that is sort of a modern Republican line. We have Chris Christie and we have Rand Paul sort of talking about the notion of mass incarceration and trying to reform, a lot of the existing standards as sort of an increasingly conservative issue, and one that I guess Romney missed the memo about.
Oh, wow. I had completely forgotten about Rand Paul. Thanks for bringing him up. He better do something nuts or I'm going to forget about him.
I mean, it's weird. This really is sort of his moment to shine. This would have made a lot of sense considering, during the Ferguson era, he got a lot of, accolades from those who were in the middle for essentially sympathizing with protesters. With Michael Brown.
Sure.
Yeah, saying that, if he was in the same situation as a kid, he probably would have, thumbed his nose at the police as well. And, now that we have a similar situation here in the U.S. where, frankly, we have, a police state sort of mentality going on in Baltimore. And we actually have drones at the site, and now, of course, he's mysteriously silent because of the election, which is, kind of shocking. Since
kind of shocking. He would have either thumbed his nose or smoked a bunch of pot and kidnapped the woman and made her worship a river. One or the other. Yeah, he would have done one of those things. Fun times, Justin. I appreciate the time, man. Thanks for the updates.
Thank you. You have a good one.
Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
It's well known that harsh climate conditions can mess with your mind, from cabin fever to heat delirium. But America is now experiencing an even more dangerous disease called climaticus non-vocalism extremism. CNE syndrome almost exclusively afflicts a narrow segment of our population, Republican political officials and candidates. It might stem from a genetic defect, but scientists say more study is needed on that. Symptoms include an obsessive impulse by GOP politicos to deny that human-caused climate change is happening, often accompanied by a feverish insistence that government employees be banned from discussing it. Hard to believe? For an example of climaticus non-vocalism extremism, look at Governor Scott Walker's Wisconsin administration. The Koch-funded governor and Republican presidential wannabe is an ardent climate change denier, but the state's Public Lands Board has escalated his denial to Orwellian censorship. The two GOP commissioners on the three-member board, which oversees the ecological health of thousands of acres of Wisconsin forest lands, have banned agency employees from even considering damage caused by climate change. Worse, they have such a severe case of CNE syndrome that they've imposed a gag order on freedom of speech by public lands employees, prohibiting them from talking about climate change while on the job. The heartbreak of CNE is that its victims deny that they're in denial about the disease. Thus, the Wisconsin duo say that their no-speech rule is not censorship, because employees are still free to talk about climate change at home, or even chit-chat about it by the water cooler, just as they might talk about sports. This is Jim Hightower saying, Governor Walker, who wants to be your president, says that he finds that censorship perfectly reasonable.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Back to the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
When those Walmart guys hear the word unionize, they go completely insane. They'll find out who, and boy, if it's you, you're in for a world of pain. Yeah, I got friends with low wages. They work for Walmart in outrageously bad conditions.
tradition. Cause the union's missing.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. CarlyFarina.org, the website. You got to look at this because it's actually pretty funny. And I think the guy did a great job because while she was CEO of Hewlett Packard, well, what'd she do? Kick those 30,000 people to the curb. And the corporate argument would be, well, she had to because, she's the CEO and the tough choices. And that's why she should be president because of tough choices. And I got to be honest, no, that's not a reason you elect someone like that. It was tough choices to enrich the shareholders over the workforce. It was the tough choices that move things offshore. Those aren't tough choices. Those are, hey, I'm going to make a boatload of money, and the heck with you. But I think it's worth taking a look at all of the unhappy, unsmiley faces. Jeff Sessions, senator from Alabama. Not a big fan of Jeff Sessions, to be honest with you. But in this case, got to be honest, he's on the right track. He released a statement today on the critical alert, the top 5 concerns with Trade Promotion Authority. We've been talking about fast track for about a week and a half now, actually a couple of years now. Every time, it comes up, we're on that. But for the last week and a half, we've been focused, every day a little bit about the TPP and the fast track authority that would deliver TPP. And Jeff Sessions has said, we might want to think about this a little bit. He says Congress has the responsibility to ensure that any international trade agreement entered into by the United States must serve the national interest, not merely the interests of those crafting the proposal in secret. Now, this, I got to be honest, you got to wonder, is this, I really hate the black guy in the White House, or is this, hey, this is really a problem? Because I look at this now, Sessions is a Republican and a pretty sizable one. The idea that we should have policy based on what is best for us, kind of, I like. He says it must improve the quality of life, the earnings, and the per capita wealth of every working American. Wow. He said the sustained long-term loss of middle-class jobs and incomes should compel all lawmakers to apply added scrutiny to a fast-track procedure wherein Congress would yield its legislative powers and allow the White House to implement one of the largest global financial agreements in our history, comprising at least 12 nations and nearly 40% of the world's GDP. He also writes, the request for fast track also comes at a time when the administration has established a recurring pattern of sidestepping the law, the Congress, and the Constitution, calling out the Tea Party folks, which, again, get them involved because this is a bad deal. His number one reason that he's against it, the black guy in the White House, obviously. He claims the consolidation of power in the executive branch, which if you're in the House or Senate, you should be opposed to, the balance of power. The number 2 reason is our increased trade deficit. It's going to make it worse. We've got a massive deficit, especially with China. The number 3 reason he comes up with, got to get the tin foil hats people crazy, ceding our sovereignty and authority to international powers, something that even I'm not thrilled with. Also, it gets the currency manipulation in there. He's right. And it's going to increase immigration. If you remember last week talking to the guy from Texas, we were talking about NAFTA that caused a mass immigration crisis here in the U.S. and a mass migration problem. I would argue a refugee problem. Don't like to use that word on homeland soil, but it is what it is. So I look at these 5 ways that he's come up with, and I go, you know what? The saying, a squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. Well, he found the 5 nuts that I think are most important, and not the crazy kind of nuts. This is important stuff, and Sessions should be given at least a, hey, you don't have your head so far up your behind. So there you go. Anyway, if you missed any today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Gonna love some of the new features we've got with our new setup and how we're cutting up the interviews for folks to take a look at. I'd love to hear some feedback on that. Also, you can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Rick Smith Show. So much to do, so much time this week. We're going to be spending a lot of time on Teacher Appreciation Week. And of course, make sure you thank your teachers. Make sure you thank the folks that are teaching our kids and future generations. And a lot of stuff to get to around the TPP and all the news that's coming out of Baltimore. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.